of a couple things that are best practices here when you're tuning into Brand Innovators live casts. The first is that we recommend you use the Google Chrome extension. If you're using Google Chrome, we find that it's the best way to view the live cast. And another best way to view it would be to view it in grid view. So there's a button at the top of your screen. You can click, it slides out, and you can essentially click the one that has kind of a grid view. And it'll allow you to see both of the speakers on screen at the same time instead of toggling back and forth between the two. Definitely recommended. If there's somebody who couldn't tune in today for whatever reason, this live cast is going to be available on demand. It's actually being live streamed on YouTube. Hello, haven't had enough coffee today. Right now. So you can share that link with anybody who couldn't tune in, and then all of the clips of each session will actually be on our website forever, archived. So you can also find it there. So before we kick things off, just wanted to say thanks to Cisco WebEx. They're our awesome technology partner today, powering the program. So special thanks to them. And without further ado, I'm excited today. I specifically requested to kick this off. Jukin is a great partner. They have an amazing marketing team. I work with them every week on programming, and they're fantastic. So special thanks to them for putting this awesome afternoon together. Thanks, guys, Mike and the team. And I'm excited because John Toronto, the VP of Sales at Jukin Media, is joining us. He's your MC. John's been a longtime friend of Brand Innovators. So we're so excited to have him here today.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good, good. Well,
it's a little chilly up here in New York today.
Yeah, it's fall finally for you guys.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back about 5 days and get back to 70s in October, but I might have to fly to LA for that.
Maybe I have to. Well, we're live coast to coast right now, so
great.
So we're excited and have a great day of programming.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming and Brand Innovators for organizing. My name is John Toronto. As Lauren said, I have been in media now for the past 20 years and joined Jukin Media as the VP of Sales. Jukin Media is an independent digital media company that helps brands achieve their goals across content, creative, and media. In 2020 alone, we performed licensing and clearance services for more than 200 advertising campaigns, including Google, Coke, and Nike, using real moments for real people. Our branded content campaigns with major brands have received more than 50 million views, and our streaming TV strategy earned us a 2020 Digiday Award for Best Publisher Pivot to TV. Sorry, I've not had enough coffee yet today either. I have a little thing up there now. I'm thrilled to welcome our first panel of the day. We have 4 amazing brand experts joining us. First, we have Drew Mueller, Director of Strategy and Operations at House of Highlights, Deirdre Lester, Chief Revenue Officer of Barstool Sports, Mark Cohen, Chief Content Officer of Overtime, and last but not least, Dev Sethi, Head of Sports for Instagram. This session will be moderated by our own Brendan, Senior Vice President and Head of Licensing at Jukin Media. So take it away, Brendan. Let's see if I can hand this off.
Yeah, I think you did it. Hey, John, thanks. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We have a really great panel today. We're going to be talking about the future of sports storytelling. And when I think of the future of sports storytelling, I think of digital sports. And there's 4 major players in the game right now, at least as far as what I think are the most important, most valuable. It's Barstool Sports, House of Highlights, Overtime, and Instagram. And it just happens that we have 4 people here from 4 of those companies. So guys, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. You did a quick round of introductions just real fast. So we have Deirdre Lester, Chief Revenue Officer at Barstool Sports. We have Drew Mueller, who is the Director of Strategy and Operations at House of Highlights. We have Mark Cohen, who's the Chief Content Officer at Overtime. And last but not least, we have the man with the greatest title on the planet, Head of Sports at Instagram. Guys, we can agree that Dave has the best title ever. Right? Yeah, I think so.
Sure. The title is great. The role can be very unglamorous at times. I promise you that.
Sure, I'm sure. Okay, Guys, let's get started, and I appreciate everybody being here. So when we think about the future of sports storytelling, we often think about, how do we engage the next generation of fans? And Deirdre, I'll start with you, because I think Barstool probably knows its fan base better than anyone. And maybe that's because when Dave Portnoy started the company, he had such a strong voice, and unapologetic as it is. Dave Portnoy graduated from the University of Michigan, by the way, so go Blue. Deirdre, can you just talk to us a little bit about why and how Barstool has been able to engage that next generation or younger fan base with its content and with its voice?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, hi, Brendan and everyone else, Dave, Drew, Mark on the panel. It's great to see you guys again. I think, yes, we are one of the best at engaging young audience. For anyone who's listening in and maybe doesn't know us as well, Barstool Sports is a top 10 distributed media company in the U.S. currently. Big focus on sports, obviously, that's our name, but also very much focused on sports, lifestyle, pop culture, and entertainment. So we've really broadened kind of the topics we cover, and the way we cover it, and the voice and tone of our personalities is very much fan to fan, peer to peer. I think that is the thing that separates us from the mainstream, particularly in the sports genres, mainstream media, is that, we're really fans speaking to fans in an authentic tone and a voice that they recognize and speak to one another in. And I think that the word authenticity, as overkill, buzzwordy as it is really something that we are very, very, committed to maintaining. And I think that that's something that has continued to separate us from, again, that mainstream sports media kind of talking heads type of content and coverage.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it feels like broadly across these four, or at least these three properties, and then Instagram, that's the case. Drew, I want to go to you quickly because you House of Highlights started off similarly with one voice with Omar, right? And so with Omar no longer being there, how have you been able to maintain that strong voice for that young culture, and at the same time you're owned by Turner? So how are you able to balance those two things and continue to maintain that authenticity and voice?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for us, it's really been the focus on the packaging of content and the selection of content and making sure that it always stays core to that, the actual purpose of House of Highlights as a platform. And that's to deliver Gen Z audience everything that they want to see in sports and youth culture. So, whether it was one person, crafting the voice early on, and then as that expanded, as the brand grew up older and older, I think, when you have core values and you have a certain way that you approach content, I think that comes across no matter who's kind of behind the scenes choosing what content goes up or choosing the caption on a given day. I think that's what's been the most, salient part of House of Highlights in its, 3-4 year history so far, is that it's not just one person behind the handle. It's really a sentiment of how you select and then position and package content. So as Deirdre said, it's really the aspect of authenticity, but I would also say relatability, and making sure that anytime we're bringing content or selecting content for the audience, that it comes across like it's something that one of your best friends would have sent to you, and it's positioned in a way that feels normal and casual and not like it's trying too hard. That's reflected, from the great programming team that we've always brought on. But I think what goes into that is making sure we're bringing people in that reflect the sentiment that the Gen Z audience has, and making sure that it's programmed by the people that we hope to consume it, I think always comes across, and that's kind of the driving function day in and day out.
That's the captioning, I think, is I follow everybody here on Instagram. It's my main sort of consumption mechanism for all the brands. That caption it comes across every single time. The same with Barstool. Mark, I want to go to you for a second, because Overtime is a very interesting philosophy around content and programming. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, right now we have 20 to 25 shows that are in production, and we always have 20 to 25 shows that are in production. And what's a little bit different about us is that we're really hyper-focused on character development and narrative storytelling. And our programming is also generally runs 15 minutes plus compared to a lot of digital publishers that are in the 1 minute to 5 minute range with a lot of the content that they're creating. Drew said something interesting about, programming, using, Gen Z to program the House of Highlights channel. And I think of it similarly in that I have a lot of millennials and Gen Z who are creating my content, whether that is on camera or whether that is the editors, producers, or shooters that are in the field. These are digital natives, right? And so when we're able to use digital natives to be able to go out and tell narrative-based storytelling about the people and the teams that they care about most, the trick that the internet has that television does not have is it has such great data from the perspective of understanding who does the audience engage with the most, right? If you're a television station or even a sports writer, you're kind of like in the air of like, hey, should we cover this? Basically, and everything defaults to like, let's cover LeBron, but they never kind of go a layer deeper to figure out who are the people and who are the stars that these 17-year-olds really love to consume a lot of. And also, they're not using all of the retention charts that tell you how to edit a video. So we coach these young producers and editors to be able to edit videos in a way that makes sense for this next generation of sports fans. And, when you really look into it, one of the things that we hold up really high is right now there's been 3,800 videos of an hour or more posted to YouTube by sports publishers. Number one and number two most viewed video on YouTube over an hour by sports media publishers are overtime videos. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in. And it's honestly no wonder why, 25 million more people over the next 5 years will cut their cord.
What's really interesting about what we've got some commonality here is that we have people who consume the brand producing content for the brand in each instance. And Dave, so I want to kick it over to you because you spend a lot of time with the leagues and the teams and the broadcasters. I want to know, who do you think, who's doing it well in terms of reaching the next generation, and how are they doing it well?
Yeah, I think there's a reason you've assembled this panel, and it's because everyone on this panel represents an organization that does this really well. And I think there are a couple of through lines that I feel are constant with the three brands that are on this panel, as well as a few other broadcasters and leagues. And I think generally speaking, they are highly relatable and relatable to their fan base. And I think that relatability is in a number of different ways, whether it's the talent that is in front of the camera, who doesn't feel like they are, a retired Hall of Famer who the very few people in the audience could ever aspire to be. This is the overtime Larry and Chloe's. These are the Dave Portnoy's. These are the ones who look and feel like us and feel like we can aspire to be them, or at least understand and relate as to who they are. I think all of these brands on stage, or this virtual stage, do a great job of not just broadcasting to their fan base, but actually build communities. I know there was a great article written up about Overtime and how they've done a very unique job of building community, but that can look and feel in a number of different ways and really bringing those fans into the experience, whether it's curating UGC, whether it's having that sort of two-way dialogue. You mentioned, I think it was Drew who mentioned sort of the captions and how they speak to their fans. At times, it looks and feels like an entirely different language than what I'm probably accustomed to. I would venture to say that, unfortunately, the social rooms at Barstool, Overtime, and House of Highlights are probably skewing younger in age than I think any of the four of us or five of us. But there's a reason for that, and it's because there is a way to communicate with those fans that feels unique and specific. And again, I think that is a nuance that other brands need to spend more time thinking about as well. If you look at the league side, there are organizations that everyone recognizes, like the NBA, who have done a great job of being athlete-centric, which is a huge interest point on Instagram for young people. But they've also gone so far, and the NFL specifically has gone so far as to partner with Instagram to actually create a Playmakers program that brings young digital natives, to use Mark's term, into their organization spiritually and help them produce content for their channels. So you've got young people creating for young people. And so I think, again, to use that term that Deirdre referenced is probably overused, that authenticity. What better way to do that than by actually having the voice and tone of what you're producing be produced by the very people who actually are more inclined to consume that.
That's great. Quickly, everybody who's in the audience, feel free to ask questions. We'll have a sort of a 10-minute at the end of our discussion to have the panel answer questions. I want to go to sports culture in terms of programming. And Deirdre, I'll go to you. Obviously, you don't have highlight rights, which is a traditional way in which you tell sports stories, right? Highlights and commentary. You guys have taken that to a different level. You spoke about it briefly. Obviously, we have the pizza review show. We have a cooking show. How do you guys think about gambling? Is obviously something that's become very huge for Barstool. How do you guys think about that additional programming outside of just like talking about the sports themselves?
Yeah. So one thing that I just want to, like, listening to this panel, and I mentioned it when we had our prep session, like this is like a reunion for me of sorts with some of the folks here, Dave and Mark in particular, and you, Brendan. But one of the things that is interesting to hear when Mark's talking about overtime or Drew's talking about House of Highlights and it's like 5-year run in the media industry, that's really fascinating how young these brands are and how big they've become and the size of the audiences they're garnering. I've been at Barstool 3 years, but Barstool's been in business 17 years. So it's really interesting to see how long of a run Barstool's had and how relevant and culturally relevant it is right now today. One of the things that is at its core, and you just mentioned, is gambling. So Dave started the company, originally to be about sports betting. That's his passion. It's always been a through line in all of our content. It's partly why he's been so relatable to the average sports fan, is because, if they're betting on sports and they're calling their bookie on the weekends, like that is what Dave has always been doing as part of the content. It's what's made it so engaging. So that's obviously a huge focus of what we're doing now, obviously with sports betting becoming legalized in the US and Penn National investing in Barstool and us launching the Barstool Sportsbook. But even beyond that, you mentioned we have shows that don't even touch on sports. We have, pop culture and entertainment shows, women's and men's lifestyle programs that are really entirely outside of the realm of sports. And then some of those personalities do cross over into sports. So you have a great example is Chicks in the Office, which is essentially like a modern day version of E! News. And it's, Rhea and Fran talking about what's going on tonight's episode of The Bachelorette, but also, what's going on in celebrity and pop culture. And then Fran, can turn around and this year launch a new football show with Casey Smith, who is a former, sports broadcaster, come to Barstool to become a sports broadcaster here. And they're launching a new NFL show called Dime Package. So, our personalities can have multiple passion points, and Barstool gives them that flexibility to be able to talk about all of that on our platform and not just be sort of like one swim lane in terms of what people's interests are. So for us, it's like, you don't have to turn the channel from, sports broadcast to pop culture. It's like, you come to us for all of it.
Right. And we talk to brands all the time about passion points. And it sounds like in terms of, people aren't just passionate about a brand. Let's say it's a shampoo, right? Somebody who likes shampoo may also love music, they may love food. And how do you use those things to speak with them better, to make them more relatable to your brand? And you guys do an excellent job at that. Drew, I want to throw it to you quickly, because you do have highlight rights, and that comes through ownership by Turner. How do you use highlights on social, mix that with sort of the digital native content to engage fans, as we probably start to see maybe live sports viewing by younger fans start to decline? How do you use that to your advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to just being responsive to what your fans are telling you that they want to see more of, right? So like, I think in the early days, so much of the account's content mix was just highlights from live broadcasts. And then over time, what we're able to do is really listen to the feedback that we're getting, both from like public comment sections, but also from thousands and thousands of DMs a day, to understand how to refine what we're bringing the audience, and not just kind of continue with more and more highlights, but to kind of widen the aperture to hit on more and more of what Gen Z likes to consume. So going back to the sports culture points that Deirdre was hitting on is, whereas we were probably in the 90% range of content mix just being purely highlights 3 years ago, we're now closer to 50-50 almost between whether it be user generated content, original content, mixed with highlights from basketball and other sports as well. And that's because of what we were getting back from the audience that wanted to see more in the way of gaming or music or sports culture or athlete lifestyles, and kind of widening that definition of what a highlight is, I think has become a really important kind of calling card of House of Highlights. It's not just highlights that are happening on the court. It's things that are happening off the court, on the bench, on the bus, whether that's a professional athlete's bus or a middle school or high school bus going to a practice or a game. And so much of that is coming from social listening. So I think Mark touched on this earlier as well. But, a couple of years ago, the majority of what people were focusing on were the comment section, right? It was seeing the sentiment that's coming in the comment section of Instagram posts. But something that doesn't get talked about enough is how much of Instagram engagement has gone the way of the DM and even like saved content. So whereas people might be looking at a House of Highlights post and see a couple of thousand comments, the majority of the insight or the most valuable engagements a lot of times that we're seeing are coming through DMs, right? And that's a user making the decision to share a piece of content with their friends. And we're seeing DMs oftentimes 10, 20, 30 times more than comments. And that's the most informative thing that we can have. That's almost that, encouraging cycle that's telling us, oh, the audience is liking the Call of Duty clips. The audience is liking more and more of the Fortnite clips or the musician athlete crossover clips. And that kind of allows us to go into it with a more informed approach, as opposed to just deciding on our own what we think the audience might want more of.
Yeah, that instant feedback seems to be really important, and we'll touch on that. We'll touch on the component. Mark and Dave, I want to get to you guys quickly because I want to talk about athletes and talent. And Dave, you and I have had really significant conversations around how the platforms are being used by athletes to really showcase their own voice and really do things like product launches and tie-ins with brands. Can we expect more and more of that from athletes, whether they're professional or, Mark, we'll talk to you in a second about sort of high school athletes? Is that something we should expect more of?
Yeah, I believe that this is only going to continue, and probably at a more accelerated rate. We've seen this sort of disintermediation between the fan experience and the athletes that they like to follow. With 500 million fans on sports fans on Instagram, the average sports fan follows upwards of 8 different athletes, and so that is a direct connection between the athlete and the very people who are following them and wanting to get deeper into who those people are on and off the field. And so, as we continue to look forward at both the future of how athletes are leveraging social and digital, and then you also think about some of the tools and product offerings that not just Instagram but other platforms are also offering. It's how do you give and enable these athletes to develop their own deep personal experience with their fans, and that can be as specific as the ways in which they're able to communicate via interactivity, stickers on stories, or DMs, as I know each of the brands on this call represent. But even things like shopping, where again, yes, there are partnerships with Nike, Adidas, et cetera, that are incredibly valuable to these athletes. But for the first time ever, really, the sort of democratization of building brands for athletes and actually being able to inspire and transact with the very fans who are interested in them. And so, again, we see this as a trend that's only going to continue. And frankly, as a platform, it's up to us to make sure we are continuing to invest in product development that best serves those kinds of needs, because that need, that opportunity exists far beyond sports. Yes, you can call it an athlete, but you could also call it virtually every public figure and creator on our platform who might have that opportunity as well.
Right. And so it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for brands to get involved there, right? Themselves or the leagues or the teams. We're talking about direct relationships with the athletes in very sort of unique ways, right? Tie-ins to purchasing and things of that nature. Right?
Absolutely. And I think I read the news last week about Overtime partnering with Open Doors, to create something that's honestly incredibly specific to the community that Overtime has built, of not just fans of sport, but also participants of sport. How do they unlock really interesting and unique content opportunities that are both potentially lucrative to the athletes themselves, but also creating engaging content that young fans want to see? And so, again, I think more of those opportunities are going to present themselves as as we get more clarity on what name, image, and likeness looks like. But also, again, as we inherit this sort of headwind of young athletes who are digital natives and endemics and are thinking more so about their personal brands even before they ever step foot into an actual professional league.
Makes sense. So, Mark, I want to go to you. Name, image, likeness, obviously something that's going to be really big. We're talking about high school athletes that are on overtime, that are walking into college with millions of followers, right, on Instagram or YouTube or wherever it may be. So can you talk a little bit about, what that means for athletes, and hey, is there a possible tie-in rather immediately coming out of high school going into college for brands to associate themselves with a Mikey Williams who has several million followers on Instagram?
Yeah. So first, I'm going to disagree a little bit with Dave because I just want to have a little bit of fun here. Since everyone's going to agree with each other, I'll decide to spice it up a little bit here. So I do agree with the fact that different athletes are going to be able to go direct to their fans and be able to create really engaging and behind the scenes experiences with their hardcore fans. And I think that is something that Instagram has been a leader in and will continue to be a leader in going forward. The part where I'll disagree a little bit is that outside of people, the top stars like LeBron, like Steph Curry, who have the tens of millions of followers, and then also have the resources to be able to have their own production companies and to be able to kind of create that sort of depth of content, I do think that partnering with somebody like Overtime to be able to kind of grow their scale and be able to kind of create premium video. And, yes, the word authentic is something that is overused by the media a lot. But I do feel as though fans are more likely to watch content that feels more authentic and not done exactly by the player, because it has more of a sense of, the realness that people and the rawness of the real access to certain moments that a lot of companies that have set forth to just kind of create content for the athlete have failed at. And so in my opinion, I think that whether it's Overtime, whether it's other media publishers out there, to be able to kind of leverage their premium production resources as well as their distribution will create a more authentic and scaled approach for the athlete. Name, image, likeness is something that is going to be fascinating here, and we're possibly days away from an actual ruling by the NCAA of how they're going to handle it. But yes, I mean, we've seen it, whether it's Mikey Williams, who's a sophomore in high school, he's the top sophomore high school basketball player in the country. He's more relevant to a 13 to 34-year-old than Mike Trout. I joke all the time that Mike Trout, who's the best baseball player that we've seen since Ken Griffey Jr., and as good a center fielder as anyone has seen since possibly Mickey Mantle. Mike Trout could walk into my office, sit down and edit, and 50 of the top sports fans in the country wouldn't know who Mike Trout is. And so when you look at the relevance of these younger digital stars, just like how you have Addison Rae or Charlie D'Amelio, Mikey Williams on the basketball side is every bit as important to that younger sports fan. And that's why, Addison Rae is more popular than, a lot of major actresses amongst the next generation.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that sort of continued interaction goes. One thing I want to talk about, and you've each touched us, is the fan content that you use or the user-generated content that you use, particularly, let's call it in the last 7 months, as sort of production has had to slow down, you haven't been able to go out. And I'd like you to talk about how important that content has been to you over the course of either the last 7 months or even prior to that. Deirdre, I'll go to you first in terms of using UGC to populate and sort of supplement any original programming that you do. I think it helps bring that fan voice to the platform. Do you agree? And how do you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, Barstool is obviously very well known, as are so many of these other partners here, but, for leveraging UGC viral videos to populate our social handles. We run over 700 different social handles across Instagram and other platforms. And a lot of that is, on a daily basis driven by the user generated content that is submitted to us. And then our ability to kind of contextualize that and put our tone around it through the captions that we're putting on that and the context we put around it. The other thing too that I think we excel at is not just taking viral content and sharing it because it's what fans want to see. I actually think of those viral videos when we talk about like not having highlights, right? So I think of those as our highlights. They're literally like highlights of life. It's actually one of the things that I think fans want to see most of, and I think it's being a little bit deprioritized by Instagram wanting to see more original content from publishers. We're starting to, you still see it on our main channel, like our Barstool main Instagram, a lot more of our original content being produced and published there. And it's performing really well. And, we did very well during the quarantine with Instagram and Instagram Live. And just all the other platforms where we can, set forth live content. But one of the things we do is we instigate our audiences to give us user-generated content to share with us, and then we reshare that so they feel like they're part of the community. Again, going back to being very one-to-one with our fans, being very relatable to our fans, is if they submit, a great example would be, our Pink Whitney vodka product. Our fans will see it in a store, take a photo of it, take a selfie with it, share it back to us, and then we share that on our platforms. They feel like they're part of the content, they're part of the community. So it's incredibly important to us to make sure that we're making fans feel like they're part of the content creation that we're putting out into our different platforms.
Yeah, you've touched on a few things, and I want to get Drew. I want to talk about UGC with you because it's such a core part of what House of Highlights has done. So why don't we just dig in there for a minute, and then I'll get to some of the questions in a couple of minutes that are coming from the audience.
Yeah, totally. I think just going back to your earlier point about, come March, April during the sports pause, I think people that were, or let's call them publishers or brands that were able to create a consumer expectation for what was to come from their channel, I think were the ones that found success and that were able to actually grow when sports stopped. I think, if we were in a situation where we were only a sports highlight provider to the Gen Z audience, we would have been in a lot of trouble once all live sports stopped. And what we actually saw was larger growth and quicker growth than we had experienced ever before in the channel's history, specifically on Instagram. And a lot of that came on the back of user-generated content. And I think a lot of it is that kind of two-way connection that you have with the audience. I think if you're trying to become, a platform that's publishing user-generated content just by finding it before people, you're gonna have an uphill battle. Whereas I think the relationship that we have with the audience has them, submitting content directly to us because of that hope and that expectation that you can actually be seen on House of Highlights. And not to date myself more than Mark with the Mickey Mantle reference, but I grew up hoping or dreaming of maybe one day being on SportsCenter Top 10. And I think a lot of what House of Highlights has been able to do is kind of democratize that process and almost make it feel a bit more accessible, right? So like if I'm a high school athlete, I can actually have an opportunity to be shown on House of Highlights any day. And I think a lot of that comes with having that one-to-one connection with the people that are making the programming decisions and being able to send my clip or send my highlight directly to them. And that's I think what's really exciting for teenage athletes and even consumers.
Yeah, I think from
just
from my perspective, and maybe I'll date myself too, since we're all doing that. But the analogy that I like to give folks, I'm a huge college basketball fan, and if I was on Twitter reading Jay Billis, who's preeminent college basketball writer and personality, if that guy responded to or retweeted anything I would say, what are the first things I'm going to potentially do? I'm going to probably like and engage his content even more, and I'm going to share all that with my friends and family. And so I feel like the concept of UGC is to sort of reinforce that connection between fans and the brands. And Deirdre and I can both attest, working for, at the time, a more emerging B2C brand with Whistle Sports. The fact that we still got a litany of inbound commentary and engagement from fans who understood the programming at the time and the potential for them to get featured in that programming. It just opens up a variety of opportunities and how you can also create very cost-effective programming that feels like it's aligned with the ethos of those brands. So for UGC, I think we've all noticed, especially from a traditional broadcast perspective, they have jumped on this train, especially over the last 6 months when essentially the content they're used to programming on social, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera, has gone by the wayside. And these are trends that, again, for the panelists on this group, that their brands have been doing as part of their programming strategies since really day one.
That's awesome. So I think it feels like it's a type of. Mark, let's talk a little. We have lots of brands, lots of brand marketers listening to our discussion right now. What do you, when you think about what a brand can do to, what kind of content can it leverage to reach younger audiences? What are we talking about? Is it a mixture of the UGC and the premium? Where are they going, and how should they do this to, particularly, let's talk about sports fans, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can leverage both premium and UGC content to be able to tell your brand story. I think a really important thing that I've learned in the last 5 years is really you have to allow the publisher to speak to their audience in the way that they know is going to be successful, right? And so when you do that, like for instance, we've done a number of different things with Converse. We did our own 3-on-3 event that was kind of like a McDonald's All-American game where they did a shoe launch. And by being able to kind of launch that shoe inside of what our event was, made it so that our community was adopting what they were doing as something that was really impressive. We've seen in our comment section when we've done a bunch of our different shows where people call out, "Oh man, I just tried that new body armor flavor. That make sure that you get this one because this one is the best flavor." And so when you allow a brand to kind of play around, allow a publisher to kind of play around with your brand and be able to do it in their authentic voice, it's something where we've seen incredible success and our community really rallying around that product.
Yeah, that's really important to that. We'll use the word authenticity, but it's really just the sort of the voice of the publisher. Here, I want to ask a question that's been asked of you. Obviously, we've seen budgets tighten up in media right now. And so what are you doing to help deliver more value to a brand with the amount of money that they have to spend right now?
Yeah, so one of the things, I've talked a lot about this, but one of the things that we saw was, obviously with sports canceled back during the quarantine, and then the, return to sports being a little bit of a wild west in terms of timing and everything happening at once. Our partners were looking for, well, what is resonating? Like, what are people watching and engaging in? And how can we use, what we know about our audience to help inform their strategy? So, if you are going to try to play it safe and do what you've always done before and wait for that to come back around right now, you're going to find yourself, really stuck. So for us, it was just being able to really quick turn, pivot, and find shows that we had either continued to produce or new shows that were born out of the pandemic, some of them which will live on now into the future, and just look at what our fans are most engaged in, and then help our brand partners understand that and put them in those places. We're also always looking to grow and emerge. Like Dave said something earlier about retired Hall of Famers. I think that's funny given the fact that Barstool Sports most notably recently brought on Deion Sanders, one of our newest personalities, and Deion's reason for coming to Barstool and not renewing his contract with the NFL Network was, he's coaching high school football players. He's coaching his son's team, and next year he's going to, be a college level coach
on overtime, right?
He wants to be in touch with this younger audience, and he wants to be more relevant to younger consumers. And he knows that the guys watching NFL Network already know who he is. He wants to engage new people and get his message across to them. I think that's fascinating. And then you see us on the flip side signing with Josh Richards, who's a very notable TikTok star right now, and launching a podcast with him. So we're playing on both ends of that spectrum. And I think that it's a testament to us that, both very young rising stars and sort of older stars that want to maintain a level of relevance with today's youth are coming to Barstool as a platform to have that voice.
Thanks, Deirdre. Let's talk about athletes, because you brought up Dion, you brought up a few other people. Dave, I want to across the athlete spectrum in terms of successful sort of sponsorships with athletes on digital. We've talked about sort of athletes taking on partnerships with brands and utilizing them as a platform to promote, but also a purchasing mechanism as well. What do you think are some of the more successful integrations with brands that you've seen with sponsors?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to doing sort of the direct-to-consumer piece we talked about, which, for the record, I agree with Mark. Not everyone's going to be able to be a Steph Curry and create their own production company. That's, you know, the sort of the top 1%. But I think there are obviously a number of brands who are either proficient in the influencer marketing space and are now understanding that that influencer doesn't have to be a digital creator. It can be an athlete, you know, potentially even as young as a high school athlete, depending on how this legislation goes. There are a number of brands we've worked with the launch of some of our tools like Instagram Checkout that understand that the fans of their brand may not necessarily be the same people who are the fans of an athlete. And how do you tap into an athlete's audience, create great stories around things like merchandise? And the example that I don't want to say we most often give, but I think we often cite is around Adidas and how they've leveraged platform tools working with Damian Lillard to do product drops. And you've got Adidas, who's probably got a number of million followers on their platform, Damian Lillard, who does as well. And they are working with Damian Lillard to tell a great story about a product that he's obviously very personally passionate about, but that evokes a level of inspiration in his fan base to subsequently transact with Adidas, who is one of his brand partners. And so we're only seeing those examples continue to grow as brands become more proficient in what the tools are on our platform, and also how athletes start to, or maybe not start to, but continue to realize the value they can have as a partner to these brands using some of these new tools as well. It's not as simple as saying, let me just create a post that looks like specifically like an advertisement and sort of check that box of, okay, I'm fulfilling my brand obligation. It's how do we do something really unique and compelling that my fans are going to enjoy, feels organic to my voice and the things that I would normally post on social, and that can result in driving some meaningful business objective. And so, again, you look at the Adidases and the Nikes of the world, but as more and more brands are adopting our commerce tools specifically on our platform, those things are only going to come to the forefront even more.
Yeah, it feels like that content to commerce play is the future of sort of the integration with athletes and brands. And obviously over time, and Barstool and House of Highlights are doing an amazing job of selling merch through content. We've got just 2 more minutes left. Drew, I want to go to you for the last part of this here. When we talk about brand integrations across House of Highlights, give me one that you would highlight as something that you find very successful, and how is that going?
I think to pick one, we've had a really, in-depth partnership with Taco Bell for the last couple of years. And I think what's been incredible about that, going back to what Mark mentioned earlier, is that they've developed a trust with us where they understand that we only have their best interests in mind and want to, create the most organic content to appeal to our audience. And if we're trying to put commercials in the House of Highlights Instagram feed, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb and nobody's going to engage with it. And I think Taco Bell has been one of those brands that has identified what the importance of trusting House of Highlights is, or trusting a brand that has a connection with the audience. Because the tactics that they have on TV or other digital platforms must be inherently different than how they work with us. And what we've been able to do is carve out a night of the week during the NBA season and during the playoffs that is just owned by Taco Bell, and it kind of gives them a deeper connection with our NBA programming that's not just surrounding highlights or surrounding evergreen content, but it's Thursday nights on Taco Bell, and Taco Bell's owning an Instagram story on House of Highlights, as well as a packaging of other thematic highlights on our timeline. And what I've liked most about it is that they find a way to allow us to create custom interstitials for Instagram story content or Instagram timeline content that shows faces and shows House of Highlights personalities as opposed to just an ad card. And I think that's made an immense difference in terms of the performance of those campaigns, because they're not just retrofitting the same creative that they've used on other platforms, but instead they're saying, hey, here's the product that we want to get across the audience. Here's what we want them to remember. How would you guys translate this to a 18-year-old or to a 17-year-old that we want to come away with, remembering that this is the Taco Bell offering. And we've been able to work with, House of Highlights talent like Kenny Beecham and people of the past that have like an actual resonance with the teenagers that we're trying to speak to. And I think that makes all the difference for the advertiser, because they're then associated with both House of Highlights and the creator that they're speaking with.
Okay, that's awesome. So it sounds like we've got a couple of through lines here for the brands. It's really about allowing the public in an organic way. We have direct to consumer with athletes, obviously, and then potentially using user generated content as a way to speak and connect with the fans through passion points.
Yeah,
does that sound?
Brent, I would just say one more thing too, which is, you look at the three brands here on this panel, they are prolific at identifying talent who is going to resonate with a younger audience. And there's a reason that, all these brands are going the way of creating their own in-house agencies to sell the special sauce, which is how do you resonate with young people? And part of that is figuring out talent, both in-house as well as out of house, to do just that. So it's no surprise that, Drew and Deirdre and Mark are referencing people that maybe the average 35 to 40-year-old might not have heard of, but actually is quite resonant with the younger demographic, which, as we know, everyone is trying to reach.
That's awesome. Well, listen, this is really, it's lived up to all the expectations I've had in terms of maybe the best panel discussion of all time, but at least in digital sports, right? So listen, I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to John. Thank you for everybody for joining us online. John, take it away, brother.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Deirdre, Drew, Mark, Deb, and Brendan for an insightful kickoff panel for our first one today. Around brand storytelling. I think that our company is doing an amazing job with the approach by using content that's speaking more directly to the audience, and then having that audience use their UGC to feed back into content. And what we're able to do these days, comparing web to TV and using data points just to make that content speak more clearly and more directly to the individuals is amazing. And I think that each one of our companies are really doing a fantastic job. A quick reminder to the audience that we have a packed live cast today. We have great brand leaders, and it's not too late to invite friends or colleagues. Just send the link and they'll be able to join in at any time. I now have the pleasure of introducing the Zach Morris to my AC Slater. Zach Alter, the Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Juka Media. Zach is gonna share a short keynote with our audience before I move on to our Fireside Chat. Take it away, Zach.
Thanks, JT. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you all are coming to us from. I'm trying to just share my screen here. Perfect. So that was an incredible panel. I recognized as a 36-year-old very few of those names from a talent perspective. And Mark mentioned Mike Trout's the best baseball player of our time. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, and I find it offensive that he left out Miguel Cabrera, the only Triple Crown winner of this millennium, as the best player of all time. But, we can discuss that after. And as discussed, to anybody under 35 years old, I don't think it matters. But I'm here to tell you a little bit about Juka Media, and more importantly about how brands can weave authenticity into storytelling. I think in a year that we are having today, it's very, very interesting and can be challenging, but I think there's some key ways to do that. So I'm going to start with a really sort of groundbreaking statement. 2020 was the year that no one asked for. I laugh a bit. In January, I was on a similar panel at a similar organization, and I was talking with a contact of mine who's a head of innovation at a large agency. And we were laughing about how 2020 was going to be a tough year for brands because there was going to be, a lot of drama around the election. And obviously that might have been the most short-sighted statement ever. Certainly there's drama around the election, but you look at everything else that's going on. We don't need to recap it. Obviously coronavirus wreaking, medical havoc and economic impact. There's a fight for social justice and equity that seems to be much harder than it should be. Half of the western part of the United States has been on fire for the last 2 months. It has just been a really, really tough year for individuals. You've got people whose lives, parents who are having to work and parent and kids are in virtual school. It's a lot going on at once that was not anticipated by anybody. And while, sort of the plight or the struggles of brands, pale in comparison to the individual struggles that folks are going through, we'd be remiss not to mention that brands have had plans that, if you think back this time last year and what you thought your plan for 2020 was going to look like, I can't imagine there's a single brand in the world who it looks like what you thought it would. I mean, everything was upended. You've also got a number of different, sort of potholes and pitfalls that are waiting for you. And how do you navigate messaging and communication streams to customers in a way that is relatable to them, that is empathetic to what folks are going through, and manages all these different sort of competing priorities of bad news that are out there. So it's certainly been one heck of a year. One of those ways that I think brands can connect to folks are through user-generated video. We just heard a lot about it. But through all of this, through everything that we've seen and gone through this year, there have been amazing moments captured and shared by real people that are documenting what their lives are like. And especially when you think about, we cannot, as individuals, as a society, connect physically in person like we are used to. We are finding new ways to connect and share our lives with our friends, our families, our followers using digital and social media. So think about all the things that you've seen this year. Think about all these videos. Think about the drive-by birthdays and the socially distanced graduations. Think about folks who have gone to their balcony and played concerts for their neighbors, or connected via Zoom calls, or parents who have found unique ways to entertain their kids. I saw a video of a couple who had set up a slip and slide in their hallway for their kids indoors that would have never happened in sort of normal life. So all these moments that people are using to connect with each other, they persist. There are millions of them every single day. And it's a real opportunity for brands to, A, speak very relatably and authentically to customers, and to B, speak, avoid some of that bad news, to connect with consumers around really positive, uplifting moments. And C, Republican, Democrat, coastal, middle of the country, Gen Z, boomer, old, young, Facebook, Instagram. These are the moments that sort of democratize content. Everybody loves these. There's no political slant to them. There's nothing. These are just pure moments in people's lives. And so we think these make a huge opportunity for brands. And this ultimately is what Jukin's business is built on. Real people, real moments, real emotions. These are the moments that we are sharing as individuals, and this is our business. So what does that mean? Just real quickly on Jukin. Every day across the world, we are scouring all of the major social video and sharing platforms: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, etc. And we find what we consider to be the best of these slice of life moments. High quality, emotionally compelling, brand safe, connective tissue. This is the social currency that powers the internet. We find the best of this, we acquire the rights to it, and then we utilize it and help brands utilize it as part of media, content, and creative campaigns to connect to consumers. There's sort of three ways that we do that. There's a licensing operation where we're working with different creative agencies and creative groups at brands who are licensing individual clips from our library of about 60,000 individual clips. This has been particularly relevant, as you can imagine, over the last 7 months or so, as yes, production has been shut down and UGC provides a very nice alternative for that. But B, brands are looking to speak to people in terms they can understand or they want to understand. And real life content in a moment where folks want to be talked to in a different way is a really valuable tool. We have a production studio, and we are producing and distributing a number of different branded content campaigns across our properties, and then media. We offer premium, high quality video inventory across social and streaming channels. Lastly, last sort of little overview on Jukin. We've taken this library of content. We've taken this expertise and experience in packaging and programming it, and we've built 6 owned and operated properties that live across social and streaming. People Are Awesome is a celebration of achievement. It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Pet Collective is a lifestyle property for pet owners. This Is Happening is our current events brand. I like to call it the internet's biggest fan. It's a look into social video, viral video, what's going on in the cultural zeitgeist. Poke My Heart, sweet, emotional, inspiring moments, the stuff that'll make you cry and quickly wipe away your tears before your family members or coworkers see it. It's soldier reunions and gender reveals and all those amazing kid and family moments. Fail Army, which you may have heard of because it was a show on MTV2 for about 7 years, 7 seasons, is our way of laughing at each other. You might argue that Fail Army could also be the name, the unofficial name of 2020. And then Weather Spy is our newest property. It is a sort of a weather property for Gen Z and millennial consumers who look at weather not just as forecasts, but as a look into nature and adventure and environmental issues. So 200 million fans, 2 billion monthly video views. We're one of the largest programmers of streaming channels across connected TV platforms with 7 million hours viewed. So there's a lot here. And I think what this speaks to is that people are rabid for this content, regardless of which channel it's on, where they're viewing it, which screen they're viewing it on. And so let's, quickly shift to how brands can utilize and have utilized real life user generated video to connect to consumers. We'll just show a bunch of examples and maybe I'll make some dad jokes and then I'll shift you back off to JT and other people who are significantly smarter than I am. Our most recent campaign, working with Hershey and their Reese's and Kit Kat brands. And this is really interesting to me because I think, when quarantine or when sort of the COVID crisis first started in March and April, we all had to relearn how to do life. And then as we got into summer, I think folks got into a groove and sort of understood their boundaries and set their boundaries. And now we're coming into a period of time, Q4 specifically, where you've got Halloween and Thanksgiving and winter holidays. And there's renewed discussion of, oh man, how do we do Halloween this year? How do we do Thanksgiving? We're all figuring it out again. And so I think for brands, there's an opportunity, especially ones that have a traditional lineage in these moments. Don't run away from it. Don't run away from Halloween alignment and Thanksgiving alignment. But think about what does it look like differently this year than last year? And that's what we've done with Hershey is we've created a number of different spots that are running across YouTube, utilizing UGC and some really unique tactics to think about what Halloween looks like this year. So I'll show you a couple examples. I know that video on WebEx can be a little dicey, so nothing here is too long, and just know that these are really smooth in person. So let's watch the Kit Kat example first. Say chicken. So again, just very quick, Halloween takes no breaks. Again, speaking to consumers and understanding the situation that folks are in, where they're wondering, and even the tagline of I think it said "Donut Stop the Fun," right? Like, do it smartly, but you don't have to just skip Halloween this year. And then the example for Reese's is one of my favorites. Right, there may not be Halloween parades this year, but it doesn't mean you can't stuff your 1.5-year-old into a disco ball. And as the father of a 2.5-year-old, I think I just learned what we'll be dressing up as this year. But throw your own parade, right? Again, speaking to consumers, don't shy away from it. You don't have to not mention it, but speak to the situation. We just got off a panel all about sports, and we talked about the fact that this summer and spring there was a dearth of sports. We're in a better situation now. Football is back. We're in the World Series, NBA Finals, and Stanley Cup Finals just wrapped up. But we partnered with Michelob Ultra to give folks sports in an environment where there was none. And so we took clips from our library of amazing sort of backyard sports moments. And via Michelob Ultra and their agency partners, we worked with Joe Buck, the famous sportscaster, to add play-by-play calls to some of these amazing sports moments. So I'll share this with you just for a second.
When you want to clean up and you want to work on your footwork, this is amazing. Look at this absolute incredible talent. This is hacky sack at its best. Something I couldn't do on the playground. I wasn't a popular kid. That's for another day. And this one is swished into the trash can. Amazing. Let's roll this again. This is recycling at its finest. And got it again. I could watch it all day. Crunch it up. Recycle, enjoy.
So again, speak to the situation. And we created a number of these assets that were then pushed out across our channels, across Fox Sports, across Ultra channels, and seeded out a contest where users could submit their own videos to have Joe Buck at his play-by-play. So again, a really unique execution, speaking to the moment that we were in, but entertaining and connecting with audiences in a different way. As I go to the next slide, hopefully. Yep. Cheerios, long lineage in morning time, right? And people are spending more time at home. Folks are working from home, virtual learning and school at home. And so they wanted to connect with audiences around these morning moments while still utilizing their own creative. So we created a sort of a 30-second mini sponsorship, if you will, that pairs user-generated video with their creative asset. These are then running in the ad inventory across our streaming channels. So again, just a unique way, and I'll share it with you, of how you can take your existing creative and add an element of UGC to make it even more relatable and relevant.
What are we going to do today? What kind of day are we going to have? What do we do if we fall down? What do we do if we see someone party? 1, 2, 3.
If you want to show the world the good you do, Cheerios can help to feed the good inside of you. And in the morning, if you think your heart does a flap, feed the good inside of you, because it never stops. Cheerios.
One of my favorites, again, just a really unique, if that doesn't make you smile, I don't know what does. And then finally, you're not going to get a presentation on internet video without dogs and cats. And so I think this one's really interesting. We've worked with PetSmart now a couple times, but we partnered with them. Everything you've seen has been largely brand messages. This commercial spot has a very specific product message. So UGC can speak to a specific product and a specific offering. And this one was about their curbside pickup that they were obviously and have been promoting since COVID.
Whether it's bribes to roll over or an overdue makeover, get all your pet essentials right when you need them with curbside pickup at PetSmart. Just order online, drive up, check in, and pick up.
So again, just a really unique product-focused message. And the last thing I'll show you, yes, I'm sure this stuff made you laugh, made you smile, gave you goosebumps, whatever it is, it had an emotional connection. But this content also drives business results. So these are just our benchmarks for brand lift across affinity and purchase intent and recommendation intent. So it works. It really works. So look, 2020 is challenging for everybody. 2021, unfortunately, probably some of those challenges are going to carry over. But there are these moments, and there are new ones every single day. We just saw the ocean spray spot with tick on TikTok. And that guy in that video went viral. Who knows why? There's no, particular method and formula. But one thing we can all agree is it was just an authentic. That guy's truck broke down, and he just found a way to make a moment of it. And so I think, as you think about there are millions of those moments happening every day, and folks are using them to share with each other. It's a language that people speak, and there are ways that brands can participate in that conversation and do so in a way that connects them closer, more empathetically, more authentically to customers. So that's it. I'm going to turn it back to JT. Thank you for the time. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Zach, awesome job. Thank you so much. I think that if you dress up like a disco ball, you will be a shoo-in for the Jukin Halloween contest.
I would hope so, right? If I can't win being a disco ball, then I just quit. Like, I'm never dressing up again.
Please don't quit. Thank you again, Zach. Fantastic job. We're now going to move on to our Fireside Chat. We're thrilled to welcome Ari Avishai, I hope I said that right, Ari, to the stage. Ari is a director of original marketing at Hulu. Prior to Hulu, Ari was a director of brand marketing and co-head of Lyft Entertainment, the original development group within Lyft Inc. The session will be moderated by Jukin Media's own Valerie Rocklin, Director of West Coast Sales at Jukin Media. Welcome to the stage, Ari and Val.
Thanks, John. How are you?
Doing great. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie, and as John mentioned, I head up West Coast sales for Jukin with a large focus on the entertainment category. Earlier this year, we partnered with Hulu, so I'm really excited to introduce Ari Avishai, the Director of Originals Marketing at Hulu, to chat about the state of entertainment marketing. Welcome, Ari.
I am not Ari. However, Ari's having some technical problems, so we can riff for a sec. I think it's really cool that a lot of what we've been hearing about from everyone so far, and just from feedback over the last 6 or 7 months, is that audiences are leaning more into authenticity and things that are not polished. And marketers want things that are authentic and turnkey and at scale. And that's where we're seeing the most success with both content and with advertisers. So I think that I stretched that time enough. Ari, I think that you're on.
Okay, great.
I'll kick it over to the both of you.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Hey, Ari, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Good, good. I'm fantastic. So let's get right into it. You've been at Hulu for a little over a year now, and goodness, what a year it's been. And before that, like John mentioned, you were at Lyft and CAA. Can you start off by giving everyone more of a background about, your career as a brand marketer and how storytelling has played a role in it?
Absolutely, happy to do so. As you mentioned, to date, the majority of my career was at CAA and CAA marketing. Those unfamiliar with CAA, Creative Artists Agency, is one of the, if not the largest entertainment agency in the world, primarily founded in talent representation, representing actors, writers, athletes, musicians. And the group that I was in, CAA marketing, was a group of marketers that worked directly with brands, in some cases Fortune 500, Fortune 50, or even startups, to help leverage the connectivity, the insights, the expertise that we had to build strategic campaigns, partnerships, content creation. And we did that on behalf of incredible brands like General Motors, which is Cadillac, GMC, Chevy, and Buick, Chipotle, Mattel, Diageo, and many others. And the foundation of that was really, as you mentioned, storytelling. And when I joined that group back in 2009, it was also at a time of a lot of change of consumer behavior and consumption. And although we like to pretend that we could predict the future, of course we could not. But the one constant, while we knew things were changing in terms of how and where people were going to consume content or consume storytelling, the one thing that we knew was going to remain the same was the power of story and the power of talent, and knowing that wherever incredible talent goes, again, be it an actor, a writer, a director, a musician, eyeballs and fans will follow. And if we could stay on the forefront of that and the forefront of the trends, then we could do an incredible job working with our brand clients in finding ways to market, to communicate, to tell stories. So was at CAA for many years, then went to Lyft in 2017, and spent a lot of time. The majority of our marketing, or our brand marketing efforts at Lyft, was all around entertainment and storytelling and becoming a fabric of popular culture. And was there for about a little over 2 years, leading in through the IPO, and then last summer decided to join Hulu and bring the background and the expertise that I had in marketing and entertainment and technology, and had worked with Hulu many times over in the past, and was a big believer in what that brand stood for, and the offering and the storytelling and the product, and joined Hulu, where I've been helping to lead the marketing around the originals for, as you said, just over a year now.
Fantastic. Well, they're lucky to have you. You mentioned pop culture, and on our prep call, you talked about being a student of culture. Can you elaborate a little bit for the folks tuning in about what that means to you? And also, is there anything that's happening right now that is catching your eye, and how is it influencing your marketing strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. Calling myself and reminding myself to always be a student of popular culture is an important part of the fabric of who I am, but also the people that I like to surround myself with. And what I mean by that is constantly staying curious and constantly staying in a state of learning and trying new things and meeting people with different backgrounds and sharing stories and sharing experiences. It's the antithesis of comfort, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. It's something that I've tried to talk to and encourage my teams to do at all times in taking meetings that might not seem to be directly relevant on the surface to what is in front of you at that moment. But you never know where that's going to take you. And I think a lot of that comes from the foundation around the importance of partnership and knowing that we're not going to be able to do it alone. Our team, the team that I help lead, is not going to be able to do this alone. We're going to be reliant upon our partners, be it media partners, creative partners, and in order to really find and uncover those opportunities, you need to stay hungry and persistent in your pursuit of curiosity, and that's why that constant state of being a student is important. Not to mention, as we all know, the constant state of evolution that our world is in. And in the uncertainty of what the future brings, if you, in my opinion, if one takes themselves out of being a student, you're going to fall behind quickly. And I think that's an important part of marketing right now, whether you're doing brand marketing, content marketing, product marketing, maintaining that level of curiosity and interest is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and I really agree with you that curiosity is the cornerstone of innovation. And speaking of innovation, we are in these really trying times where consumer behaviors and mindsets are shifting quicker than ever, right? We're having to respond with limited information, with an overabundance information, not knowing what information is true or not. And I think that presents a challenge to marketers. It is forcing marketers to innovate at greater speeds without as much information as they'd like to have about consumer mindsets. So how are you responding to those challenges?
It's a good question, and it's one that's a constant state of evolution. I mean, in these times of significant uncertainty, there is, in my opinion, a natural human instinct to stay with what's comfortable and stay with things that you're sure of. And while I agree with that to some degree, we can't lose focus on innovation and on trying new things and learning and testing. Now, I completely agree. In these times of uncertainty, it is important to place bets in areas that have low risk, things that we're certain of, and we do that, and we'll continue to do that. But ensuring that we continue to keep some portion of our efforts, of our time, of our energy, of our budgets towards areas of innovation, because we don't know what the next 3 months, 6 months, a year will look like. And if we put all of our efforts towards things that were in those areas of pure comfort, they might work in the short term, but it'll be at the expense of the long term. Yeah. And I think that's what I've been encouraging our teams to do.
Absolutely. And I can tell you just, as being a new partner to Hulu, we worked with you guys in May, which was, right at the height of everything happening. We really appreciated you taking a chance on us as a new partner, being open to, testing. And I think it's something that all, marketers right now should be looking at, because, a safe bet is good, but we can't lose sight of innovating and moving forward either.
Agreed. Like many analogies in life, a diversified portfolio of activity is important.
Exactly. So let's talk about some recent campaigns. You can mention one or a few, but thinking about innovation now versus a year ago, talk to us a little bit about how your marketing has maybe changed in response to what's happening right now versus how you would have done it, had the same title come out a year ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. The speed of innovation has changed so much in the last 7 or 8 months, however long we've been in this situation, and it's still not at a point yet where I'm able to define what that change in speed is. It's just different, and I think there's certain things we were talking the other day. There's certain things that we were doing with our campaigns 6 months ago that we at the time we thought were wildly innovative. But now, as we look back on it, some of those initiatives, when I read through some emails from way back 4 or 5 months ago, some examples. Well, I think, and it's this feeling of, wow, what we thought was so innovative 4 or 5 months ago seems so basic, for lack of a better word, right now. And so, doing things early on with surprise Zoom talent appearances, which
Zoom
backgrounds, exactly. It has that feeling of, when you kind of go through an old junk drawer and you find your cell phone from 2 years ago and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I used this phone once upon a time, yet it was only 2 years ago or 4 or 5 years ago. Well, that's happening now with the work that we did just 3, 4, 5 months ago. And I think there's certain things that we did then that made sense. And we, of course, were the beneficiary of people having a lot more time on their hands to stream content. And I think there's things that we've done in the past, in the recent past, that spoke to that. And being able to watch people's behaviors, take the creative of our shows, of our titles, and find unique ways to communicate with people. Whether it was the work that we did together around Solar Opposites and really tapping into the fabric of that show, which was really, really funny, and partnering with Fail Army and finding ways to integrate, knowing that fans were going to be watching a lot more internet videos at the time, finding what is the right brand, what is the right property, what is the right audience for us to integrate Solar Opposites within. And Fail Army made a ton of sense. And you guys did just a tremendous job in getting into the library of content that you had and integrating Solar in a way that was a significant contributor to the success that we had of that campaign. I'm glad that we did it and we tried it, and it was the first time that we'd partnered with you guys in that way, and it made a ton of sense. We also we acquired a film at Sundance. The last time I saw you, acquired a film at Sundance called Palm Springs. That at the time we were very bullish about how good the film was, but little did we know how relevant it was going to be creatively. And without giving away too much about the film for those that may not have seen it, it's very much it's a time loop film where Andy Samberg is kind of stuck in the same day over and over again. When we acquired it, I wish I could say that we knew that 5 months later we were all going to feel like we're in a time loop every single day. But we acquired the film based on the power of the story, and then as the world evolved around it, we evolved the campaign around it, and kind of took to the nature and the behavior of everyone feeling like they're stuck in a time loop, and designed a campaign to make an attempt to draw some humor upon the situation that we were all in, and ultimately was very successful. The film went on to be the most successful film that Hulu has launched. So.
That's amazing. Speaking of platforms and things that work and things that don't, early on in the year when Corona first hit, there were a lot of articles, talking about, will this be the death of influencer marketing? I think a lot of marketers rethought their digital out-of-home strategies, considering that everybody was staying in. So how has, the last 6 months shifted your specifically your media mix? Are you leaning more into some disciplines than others? Are you seeing now, more of a resurgence back to normality? Love to hear about that.
Yeah, and some of the stuff is obvious, as you might suspect. I mean, we were questioning a lot of the out of home at a time when people were not out of home. people started to return a little bit, and it's looking like it's more advisable now that everyone stayed home for a little bit longer. So we're naturally rethinking what that means. Doesn't mean that we should be completely going away from out of home. I've seen some great out of home tactics that have had a resounding impact and generating conversations beyond just the people that visibly see it themselves. And so I think a lot of that is leaning into the behaviors that we all have. We know that people are going to be interacting in the digital way and via social platforms, as you'd expect. And so because of that, we're leaning into those. But it's not just about pushing budgets into those categories with those platforms. It's about what you do with it. Naturally, we were asking ourselves those questions and rethinking budgets depending on what it is. But it's more than just pushing more 30-second spots onto Instagram because we know people are on Instagram more. It's really thinking through what is the creative execution in how we're going to captivate these audiences and get people to want to affect their behavior and spend more time on our platform at a time when there's a lot of content out there and a lot of great content providers and very worthy competitors who are also putting out great content. What are the things that we can do to alter fans' behavior so they spend more time on our platform engaging with our shows and then subsequently using their own voices and becoming influencers in their own right to influence their friends to encourage conversation around our titles.
Absolutely. And you guys have been doing a great job of that. I think I read an article that viewership on Hulu is up tremendously. I think it was something to the tune of 9 hours, or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, we're if you read it, then sure. We're oftentimes hesitant to share a lot of those numbers. So if you've read it there, then yes. But yeah, naturally, as you'd expect, engagement has increased over this time.
Absolutely. I'll take a quick pause just to let everybody know that we will have Q&A at the end of this, so type in your questions. But let's move on. You mentioned competitors, and the term streaming wars has been part of the lexicon for years now. But this year, the last 12 months, that has really been kicked up a notch, right? We had the launch of 5 large platforms: Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Paramount Plus, Peacock, Quibi, which came and went very quickly, which is a whole separate, I'm sure, topic to talk about. But I would love to hear about what is marketing like in such a crowded ecosystem, because that really only became super crowded in the last 12 months. So how are you guys approaching and altering your strategies to compete?
It's for us, I think it's less about altering the strategy and more so about staying the course. And we're fortunate that we got, some would say a head start out of some of the other competitors that have come in. And really, everyone's at a different stage across the board. We're all at different stages in growth. And like any brand, there's some similarities to Lyft. There's different times when marketing efforts will be focused on different things, whether it is acquisition or engagement, to keep it simple. And look, we're always trying to, of course, acquire new subscribers and always trying to put out great content that keeps our current subscribers engaged. That's a given. But we're at a different lifespan or life cycle as many of our competitors. And while of course I don't know the in-depth strategies of the folks at many of those great competitors that you'd mentioned, a lot of them are in heavy build mode. And really focused on acquisition. And I imagine their marketing efforts are adjusted accordingly. We, of course, still want to acquire more subscribers. We think there's a lot of folks out there who would be massive fans of the content that we put out. And we're going to continue to appeal to them. But we also have a balance of ensuring that we continue to maintain the engagement and fulfill the promise that we've given to all of our subscribers, that you can come to Hulu at any time of the day and find content that you'll love, be it films or series, scripted or non, our own originals or content that we license from others. And there's a constant need to ensure that our marketing communicates that. And so we balance our brand marketing with our product marketing, with our content marketing. And many of our different initiatives have a different balance of what, from a marketing standpoint, of what the purpose of those are. Sometimes when we have great audiences and we know them, we know their habits well, and we feel an obligation to continue to keep them engaged, we might have efforts that are more heavily focused on maintaining that engagement and keeping them on Hulu and keeping them entertained with whether they're watching by themselves or with family, whether they're sharing and talking about it and others. And then also have other initiatives that are focused on subscriber acquisition. Again, we have over 30 million subscribers that we feel indebted to ensure that we maintain those levels of entertainment. And I imagine that our competitors might look at the landscape a little bit differently, just because of the necessity of where their product is at the moment. Some having just launched in the last few months, and some in 2019.
I think, all of those are great points. I'm curious who you think is doing, a really good job right now of marketing, and if there are any, competitor campaigns that, you've seen in the past few months where you're like, gave them a nod, said job well done.
Yeah, absolutely. So who's doing well outside of Hulu, of course. Yeah, I mean, I'll say first and foremost, I love competition. We love competition. It's great. We're seeing great, healthy competition right now. And it makes us and our teams work harder and be more creative and more strategic. So it's not uncommon for us to look at things that another partner have done, and like you said, tip your hat. I love it. I love when others raise the bar and then we attempt to go raise right on top of it. And each of our competitors, I can rattle off examples of things that they're doing really well, which is, again, great for the industry as a whole. Look, I think Netflix has done some interesting things in the past. I even a week or two ago, somebody sent me what was it for their new first series, the Haunting of Bly Manor. They did an outdoor experiential thing where they took a fountain that I think it was in New York and kind of rebranded the fountain and made it look like it was full of blood instead of water. Which I love that they did that, because I'm a big believer in the power of experiential marketing, and not surprisingly, experiential marketing has taken a big hit over this time, which is a bummer, because there's a lot of incredible experiential marketers and experiential marketing agencies out there that do incredible work, and I'll be very excited when world is back up and running so that we can get that type of marketing going. But even that as a tactic, I loved it, because it's a time when experiential marketing might be an okay thing to do, but they did a good job of it. And anyone who, of course, walked by it probably took notice of it, and many took it a step further. I live in LA, not New York, and many took it a step further and decided to make that moment a part of the fabric of their social media, and extended the communication even further.
Exactly.
So I look at that and I tip my hat. I think that was a great execution, and I encourage not just our competitors, but all brands, all marketers, to not discount the power of experiential marketing right now, just because of the situation that we're in. There are still really unique ways that experiential marketing can have a significant impact.
Absolutely. I think experiential marketing done well leads to an incredible amount of earned media. And especially, where we're heading right now, people are, it's hard to continue to stay indoors. People are venturing out. And so I think we're going to see a resurgence, and we've seen it with, drive-by events and, things that brands are doing to still create an experience around a holiday or a tentpole event. And they're using these opportunities, and they're smaller scale than they likely would have done before. But I think they're probably seeing a much greater multiplying effect out of it, because the people that are attending are super fans. They're so grateful for the experience that the brand is providing them, and they're going to get a tenfold return on that.
I agree. As long as people stay safe, stay smart, the brands, the people that are putting on those experiences, make sure to invest in the needs in order so that people can stay safe and stay smart, will benefit from it. And so I would encourage any brand that does engage in this, of course, to and consumers to, of course, stay safe during these times. But you can still enjoy life.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts? And it's something we didn't talk about on our prep call, but this was before the news came out about Quibi folding. But, you know, working at a streaming giant and, you know, having the experience that you do, I'd love to hear about, you know, where you think things went south for them.
You know, it's a lot of mix of emotions, to be honest. I have the chills just thinking about it right now, because I know a lot of people who work there, and they've been working their tails off, and I feel for them. I really do feel for them right now. And I was rooting them on, one, because they have good people who work there who are friends of ours, and because competition is great for the industry as a whole. I think the industry hurts when things like that happen, and also as a consumer, as a lover of content, that also hurts, because they were seemingly in development on some shows that might have been great. And so I hope that for the cast and the crew and the people that help produce a lot of those shows, I hope that there's a second life. I don't know anything about the business deals associated with the windowing, but I know there's a lot of good people over that who work for Quibi, or even people on the production side who are making shows for Quibi, you know, that are in really unfortunate situations right now. You know, I think it's too early to play Monday morning quarterback. At least in my opinion, I've read many of the articles and opinions on it. But right now, my feeling on it is just one of empathy, frankly, because again, I think that the industry is better when there's good competitors, and then on a human level, there's some very talented folks there who work their tails off to get to this point.
I agree with you. I think it was a very, very bold endeavor. I think everybody was, you know, rooting for them to win, knowing how much went into it, the amount of money that was raised, the players involved, you know, in the industry. We all have, you know, I think most of us have friends that were there. So it's definitely, you know, it's surprising at how quick, you know, it crumbled.
And my biggest hope is that it doesn't stunt innovation. I applaud them and their efforts in trying to do something different. And obviously, you know, it's not everything is going to be successful, but I just hope it doesn't stunt innovation.
Are you ready for some Q&A?
Sure.
All right, awesome. So the first one is, what effect do you think the Gen Z generation will have on corporations and brands as a whole as they move into leadership roles in the next 20 to 30 years?
A powerful one. Yeah, I think that that generation is being taught to communicate in ways that our generation is less so. It's less inherent to us. And I'm constantly, I mean, whether it's, I try to surround myself, frankly, as much as possible, whether it's family members or colleagues, because I think they have a very powerful voice and know how to articulate it in ways that we didn't when we were that age. They're also tremendous consumers of content, of brands, of services, and there are, I think, the quicker that we can get people of that, people within that generation into decision-making roles, the better different companies will be. Because then again, I'm making massive generalizations, but I have seen some incredibly smart, creative, innovative people in the Gen Z audience that are going to do incredible things to, you know, within the brand culture, within storytelling, within entertainment. So
absolutely. Totally agree with you. Next question is, what brands do you look up to, and what leaders in marketing do you admire?
What brands do I look up to? Like, well, I'm biased with on behalf of a lot of the brands that I've worked with. I feel very fortunate to have spent the time that I did at Lyft, and was very I mean, I have some lifelong experiences to take from that. I think our marketing leader at a time, a lady named Melissa Waters, who's now in a senior marketing role at running marketing at Instagram. She's a wonderful leader and an incredible marketer. For those that have had a chance to interact with her, I feel really fortunate that the time that I had at CAA, I worked for and mentored by a gentleman named David Messenger, who's now the global CMO of Activision. I think Activision has done a tremendous job marketing. Obviously, similar to the streaming companies, they've been a beneficiary of the fact that people have a lot more time at home on their hands, but have done incredible work during this time in creating engaging content and games. David is a tremendous marketer. I could go on. I feel very fortunate that I've been surrounded by and worked on behalf of some incredible marketers and incredible brands.
That's fantastic. I'm sure they appreciate the shout outs. So another question about how working from home and socially distancing has altered digital habits and consumer behaviors. And so what are you seeing when it comes to those types of behavioral changes? How are you guys adapting to those?
I think a lot of it, one area that comes to mind as you ask that is the different social platforms seem to be forums for different types of communication. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that brands listen to that, hear that, and maybe alter their marketing depending on what platform something's on. A spot that's created for Instagram is not necessarily going to work on Facebook or on Snap or on TikTok. There's things that, and I think it's understanding and knowing those environments and watching and listening to what people are talking about. Without going too deep into politics, you see things that are of a political nature more prevalent on certain platforms than others. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to market on those platforms, and I still think that there is a way that you can and should do so, just acknowledge that and know that people are likely going to be swiping from a friend's or a loved one's opinion about a political view to your content, and keep that in mind as you design advertising for those platforms. Similarly, if someone's on a Snapchat might be a little bit more loose or comedic in nature. If you're marketing from an entertainment standpoint, a property that is a comedy, or if you're a brand that has built up the voice to enable you to be comedic, find the right platforms to do so. Otherwise, I think you might come at risk of, at best case scenario, being ignored, or worst case scenario, coming across as tone deaf. And so I think we're relying upon, again, going back to being a student of popular culture, understanding what are the conversations that are happening in each of these forums so that you can better entertain people and better market to folks.
Absolutely. So speaking of politics, we have an election around the corner. A lot of brands, what I'm hearing and reading is, there's so much trepidation about which way it will go and what the effects of that will be. And so they're taking a pause in their marketing strategies. And that's probably not something that you have the luxury to do, because you have shows that have release dates that are going to be coming out between now and the end of the year. Are you guys making any adjustments to, potentially how the election will come out and how that will impact your marketing of these shows?
Yes, we are. And I would say for brands that, the brands that are communicating in any way, inaction is still action. Mm-hmm. And sometimes silence can speak louder than actual words. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind when designing how you as an individual, as a marketer, as a brand are articulating yourself and your values, especially at times like this where there's a very heightened sense of awareness around what's going on in the world. And the way we're approaching it as Hulu is encouraging people to vote. I think, and we have some interesting activity coming, but we've across the board encouraging people to identify ways that they can vote, giving information, linking, working with partners that are all about the encouragement of people using their voices and acknowledging the hard work that the people that came before us spent in terms of ensuring that everybody has a voice and that your voice does matter, and making sure that everybody has awareness of and access to the ability to vote is how we're approaching it. And all of the early indications of voting numbers being at levels they've never been is really exciting. And if Hulu played some small role in encouraging people to get out and use their voice, then great.
I agree with you. I think this year in particular, the message around voting has been louder and more powerful than ever, especially around voting early. I know I plan to. We have a couple of locations nearby, so I'll be hitting one of them up either today or tomorrow.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So one last question for you, probably the hardest one, but can you look into the future and, tell all these brand marketers that are tuning in today a little about, what you see coming down the line?
I'd be lying if I said I knew. But I kind of go back to one of the things I touched on before, of that in levels of uncertainty, whether it's civil or political uncertainty, which really important versions of that, or even content-wise, not knowing where people are going to watch and how they're going to watch. The one thing that remains true is talent, and is the power of storytelling, and the importance of working with and partnering with people that tell great stories. Because whether people are going to be watching them, and I hope they do go back to theaters when it's safe, but watching them on massive screens or small screens or anything in between, watching it 2 hours or in small doses, the thing that will remain consistent is the power of talent and the power of storytelling. And so while there's a plethora of uncertainties going on, as a brand, as a communicator, maintaining a presence within those areas and working with partners who are the world's best content creators, that's where I see the future.
Well, we couldn't agree with you more. I think brand storytelling now more than ever is so important. There's so much noise. And what always will stand out is a powerful, authentic story. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Val.
Thanks. All right. John?
Guys, fantastic job. Thank you both very much for your time. I think it was a great conversation. It's going to be interesting to me to see what happens with original content. Will it start pulling more and more of the real world? Will there be the folks on the show wearing the mask, taking off the mask, or talking about this, or are we going to stick more towards escapism, what movies were actually built to do in the beginning, when movies were made. So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out this year. So it was great insight.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you, man. We have 2 more panels ahead. As reminders to the audience, please continue to use the hashtag BI Livecast in any posts about today's programming. We want to hear what you guys are saying. I don't know if you guys can see me right now. I think that you can. It looks like we still have a slate up, but I'm sure we'll fix that in a sec. I'm going to be staying on. I'm happy to introduce our next 2 panelists. April Den is U.S. Director of Brand, CPG and Retail at Samsung Ads, and Jeff Spence is the Regional Vice President of Platforms at SpotX. We're going to be talking today about the rise of free ad-supported streaming TV and what it means to marketers. As they're getting themselves on, it's, for somebody like myself who's been doing this for a couple of decades, and remember when, it was pretty much just broadcast TV, and we were worried about, as broadcast TV salespeople, cable penetration, to even think that cable penetration was a thing. And marketers were buying and selling impressions on broadcast, using Nielsen the way that they still are today. But when they looked at cable, there wasn't a big enough audience to actually get ratings against most of these cable programs. So they were buying along contextual alignment. So if they wanted somebody who's in sports, they would go to ESPN, or somebody wanted food, they go to the Food Network. And it seems like it's cyclical. It's happening again, between the death of the cookie and third-party targeting and things of that nature going away. FANG and some of the big players are still being bought and sold on those platforms, on the Nielsen type platforms. But marketers are leaning into contextual alignment on CTV, and as long as the audience is big enough, it seems like a good place for them to fish. So I think that I've stretched this out a bit, and I believe that we have April on right now. Are you there?
I am. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Hi. And Jeff, I think you're on as well.
I am. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Nice to see the both of you. Jeff, that is a sweet backdrop you have there. I like the painting. It's very
Thanks.
cool.
I'm hanging out in the Guggenheim.
Oh, good. You're from the accent to the paintings. You just reek of class right now. I hope I'm bringing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
April, our backdrops are actually matching. This is what I was talking about the other day. And we're getting later in the day today. The kids are being dropped off the bus, at least in New York. So this is like reality is starting to set in, unless you're in the Google.
Right.
I want to start off with definitions. As the rise of free ad-supported TV. Like, what does that mean? It's taking hold. With any form of new media, definitions are really important. So, like, how do you explain and this question to both of you, what FAST is and how it's different from other kinds of streaming media that's out there? For example, like SVOD, Netflix, or Hulu, who we just heard from. So I'll let you both take that question.
Sure, I can jump in on this one. So FAST is basically what it sounds like, free ad-supported streaming television. It's basically ad-supported streaming video services that feature video on-demand content in a number of linear-like channels based on that video content. It's usually 100% free. It's available as apps on an array of streaming devices and smart TVs, but it can also be accessed via smartphones, tablets, browsers, you name it. And today, most kind of do not typically have original content. Instead, they're relying on sort of an array of library content that, depending on the service, is usually a mix of online video, older network TV series, or studio or independent movies. We oftentimes refer to it as cable for cord cutters.
I don't think there's really much else I would add to that. I think it's just that, if you think about inherently, when we've traditionally consumed TV, it's always sat behind some type of paywall. If you're paying cable subscription, if you're paying a monthly fee, with these free ad-supported streaming services, really, there should be no paywall, right? There are elements that there's a dual model where there's a paywall to access some content, but primarily anyone can download the app on their Samsung TV or any type of connected device, and they can start streaming, out of the gates. There's really no barrier to be able to access that content.
Great. Thank you guys for setting the stage. And I think it's important for us to set the stage because streaming really does mean so many different things to so many different people. And you could be thinking of it as a platform. You could be thinking of it as a Netflix versus a Roku, or how does Pluto fall into this, or what is Peacock doing these days? So I appreciate that definition and basically, like I said, setting the stage for this. FAST, the free ad-supported streaming TV space, has been picking up a ton of momentum. I'd like to hear your opinion on that, for what's driving that. Like, why is this taking such a hold with so much content that's out there?
I could take that one. I think there's obviously a variety of different factors. Probably, you've heard the old saying, content is king, right? I think that what you've seen with the FAST ecosystem is that there's a lot more content that's moved into that. And I think it's actually presented the viewer with a real alternative to what was traditional pay TV. If you're used to accessing premium content and you're willing to pay for that, right? Today you do that with all your SVOD services, but there is such a large amount of premium content that has moved into the FAST ecosystem as well, that it really does offer a viable alternative. I mean, you've seen the likes of Viacom with their acquisition of Pluto starting to move more and more premium like content into that. Sure, might be more catalog type of content, but I think that you definitely are seeing more content. I think the other factor is, which is part of the factor and also part of the outcomes, is the acceleration of things like cord cutting and cord nevers. There's such a large chunk of the viewership now that is never going to access pay TV, and that's just a large percentage of where they spend their time and consuming their content is across these FAST services. And probably the last one that I would touch on is just the experience itself for the user and the viewer. I think you've seen over time the way that all the FAST services have built out their UIs, much better user experience with recommendations of content, accessing catalogs of libraries of content, and just in terms of the experience that you have as a user, it's becoming a lot more premium in nature as well. And I think those kind of factors are all driving to more and more mass adoption of the FAST services.
Yeah, I would say I pretty much would just reiterate what Jeff said. I mean, I think the momentum of streaming is driven by sort of this increased fragmentation of just endless choices of high quality programming. But then it's also combined with kind of this on-demand world of digital that just is enabling consumers to be able to not just choose what they want from all those endless options, but they also get to choose how and when they want to watch it. It's sort of like, I guess, the Amazon effect of just having sort of that immediate gratification that comes with platforms like streaming. And I think in particular for mediums like FAST, consumers are only willing to pay for so many subscriptions. And that subscription fatigue has really positioned AVOD as like the new currency for engaging consumers where they're spending a majority of their time. We're even seeing now that ad-supported streaming formats are now about 44% of streaming time spent, which is approaching basically parity with SVOD. And, no surprise across every platform, linear, SVOD, AVOD, when COVID was just starting, you saw a surge in activity across all formats for different reasons, right? It was news, world news that was driving a large portion of increase in linear time spent. But then, us going into sort of working from home then increased all of the streaming services. What's really interesting is as that spike hit and then people started to settle into sort of the new COVID reality, you actually see, no surprise, a little bit of that spike start to turn downward as things start to stabilize. Yeah. But AVOD was the one area that was driving a significant portion of continued growth, both, going into COVID and after COVID, because users started to become much more comfortable with these formats. And now you'll start to see sort of this residual impact, in particular in this area.
Yeah, that's interesting that you talked about like fatigue when it comes to like what people will pay for, right? Think about like when cord cutting started, like what is that number? Like, am I okay with 3? Am I okay with 4? Is it equaling back to what I was paying in cable? Like what and this is a question we didn't really talk about before, but you brought up that point. It'd just be interesting for me to hear that. Like, what is that threshold that you think right now or personally?
So, I mean, I guess I have my own personal opinion on what I'm willing to pay for, and COVID has only made me more willing to pay for more, candidly, more than ever, because I'm just spending so much more time with myself trying to, find new things to do and engage with. But I think a lot of the data out there supports that consumers typically start to fall off between 3 to 5 subscriptions. And so, by and large, the numbers show that all of the growth that's going to be driven for marketers trying to engage with consumers are going to come from AVOD because a lot of consumers already had kind of their foundation in terms of SVOD already kind of solidified. And so as they spend more time looking for more content, they're going to be turning to the free formats because there's just so many options there. Why pay for more? So I'll say there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to cite the study offhand, but I did see recently somewhere that around a $30 purse is what the typical household in the US is willing to part for SVOD services.
I'm way over that. I'm such a consumer of content. I love how disparate it still is. You know, between Disney and Peacock. Well, Peacock is there was free options for it, but you know, if there's a specific program, it's going to drive me to subscribe, and then I'll eventually get hooked on other programs outside of that one that I signed up for. So that's interesting. And my wife is complaining to me that our bills keep on going up, and we have all these movies that we're not watching, and I don't care. We're gonna keep buying. April, this one is for you. For Samsung, manufacturers and device makers seem to really embrace free streaming. Samsung was a first mover in the space, launching TV Plus, actually one that I have. Others have followed. What have you seen in terms of usage on your devices?
Yeah, so certainly going into this year, we just launched TV Plus like a year or so ago in sort of a much more kind of consumer facing way. And it quickly became the #2 most used AVOD service on our TV sets, ahead of some of the big players that you can imagine are accessible on your smart TV. So it's quickly become one of our #1 strategic priorities, is just to continue to own more and more of that streaming time spent from consumers. So for us, it's a very important part of kind of our future-proofing strategy. What we've seen is that 90% of, well, I'll say half of the people that are using TV Plus are full-out cord cutters, meaning they're not accessing any linear content whatsoever. So it truly is for us our iteration of cable for cord cutters. But 90% of consumers that are using TV Plus also aren't using any other OTT device to stream. And that's a really interesting phenomenon, because we used to make our dumb TVs smart by plugging in a device, and that became the primary way we'd access streaming content. And in today's day and age, and it is why a lot of the device players are trying to get into sort of the OEM game and the that they now have. Are you still hearing me, John?
Yeah, you said at the OEM game, and I lost a couple of keywords in between.
Sorry.
Now.
We must be the lovely WebEx connection. I would just say that, like, for into the operating systems, because consumers are spending more time streaming directly from their TV, and they're becoming much less reliant on devices because the experience has improved so dramatically. Today, we see, I think, almost 7.5% growth just since the start of this year alone. We have about 145 channels. And if you were to just purely look at time spent on TV Plus and compare it to all of the major TV networks, we would be a top 10 most watched network on TV Plus alone. So again, the adoption was already strong going into kind of the pre-COVID world, but now COVID certainly.
April, we're losing you a bit. You've jumped in and out a little bit, at least on my screen. But there was one point that I missed that I wanted to hear. When you think about the size of Samsung, when you compare it to other smart TVs, like what type of, like, again, think back to cable penetration. Like, what type of penetration does Samsung have in the market? As if you were to look at it like a pie, like what slice of that pie would be Samsung?
Try to prevent the delay. I would just say, can you guys hear me?
Right now, yep.
For us, we've been the #1 smart TV manufacturer for the last 13 years straight. So we have about 40% market share of the smart TV.
Okay.
And leveraging our platform, the data that we're collecting from smart TVs represents 60% of all available TV data in market. So tremendous amount of scale that we really stay focused on kind of continuing that growth trajectory.
Great. We got that number. Thank you very much for that. It did cut in and out a bit, but I think it's gotten better with the camera off. You gotta love technology, and we're just doing it live anyway. So it's this is the joys of a live broadcast. But like to have that 60% or that 60% piece of the pie is fantastic, and congratulations to Samsung for being a first to market and continuing to see that growth. And obviously you're a huge partner of ours at Jukin Media. I like the experience with Samsung as you maybe watch something on the TV Plus channel and you're scrolling for your other apps, that will continue to play as you're watching or looking for something else to watch. And I think that's really cool. And obviously SpotX is getting metrics on that, and we're able to sell into that and do all those wonderful things. Jeff, there's been, and this is for you specifically, April. So I'm sorry, you specifically, Jeff. There's been a lot of M&A in the space, right? Pluto and Viacom combining, Comcast purchasing Xumo, Fox, and Tubi. How has M&A impacted the advertising market from SpotX's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very relevant point. I mean, it feels like the last 2 years it's just been a matter of time until one of the major fast services was going to be acquired. And I think that the signal that it sent to the market is, the fact that major media companies are now looking to include these fast services as part of essentially their mix of inventory that can make available to big advertisers. Really just signals to the market just how big the fast ecosystem has become and what an important player it is moving forward. I think part of that has allowed now these major media companies to expand their offering. Obviously a lot of them had very big traditional linear businesses, and as kind of the pay TV households have decreased over time, what they need to do is be able to present to buyers, hey, we can reach a mass audience. We can reach, all the data points that you want to be able to target, and all the viewers and the consumers that you want to reach. And there was a big chunk missing of that. That is obviously what that fast ecosystem has come in to be able to take up. So now I think when they present at upfronts, you saw Viacom do this, you saw Fox do this with Tubi. These fast services are very much part of the offering that they're presenting to market, to say, hey, look, we have all these core elements of our business. I'm sure you've got all the major media companies bringing their direct-to-consumer apps and leading with those. But I think a big part of that as well is the fast ecosystem. And what it's really signaled to the market, I think, is legitimizing, the fact that this is where, as a media buyer, you should be spending your dollars. If you can secure an upfront with a Viacom or a Fox that includes access to Pluto or Tubi, that really signals, hey, that's really where I should be spending my money. And so I think it's really allowed, from the advertiser's perspective, access to a hard to reach audience that was declining, and from the supply side, on the media perspective, they've been able to expand their offering to include a mix of media that now allows advertisers to reach that really hard to reach audience.
Yep. And to think back to when streaming first started, it was being given away as added value to a TV buy. And then Hulu was created, and then CBS held on to their streaming, and like this whole thing just kept spinning and spinning. So thank you for that. It is really interesting to see how everything has progressed to today.
I mean, even just seeing the news recently from a Disney around how the restructures And same thing with Viacom, right? They're almost thinking about streaming as being now the forefront of their business, and even just how they're structuring themselves moving forward is kind of putting streaming at the epicenter.
Yeah, leadership is changing hands at these big companies. They're leaning, and to one point of it, it's future facing. It's future forward, right? We're putting this step, and we're hoping that post COVID, when things go back to normal, we could continue this trend. And people are creatures of habit, so I'm guessing that these habits that we're forming right now should stick as we hopefully go back to somewhat of a normal world.
Yeah.
April, if we have you back, say hi.
I'm here. Hello.
Good. What categories of business? This is a question. I guess across the both of you, for advertising, what needs this fast fulfill for advertisers, and what does the industry need to do to mature? And April,
Can you say that last part of the question again,
sure.
John?
I'll repeat the whole thing. Advertising, right? So what needs this fast fulfill, right, for advertisers, and what does the industry need to do to mature?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. That's a really great question, but it's a very loaded question at that. I think fast is a very obvious way to reach cord cutters, especially, if you want to be where consumers are spending more and more of their time. And if you have specific types of audiences like millennials, who we're seeing are above average in terms of time spent in streaming services. And if you want to win with very important consumers like millennials that represent a huge portion of growth for a lot of verticals this year, then you almost have to be in kind of the CTV OTT space, and in particular, AVOD services. I think the challenge is that you'll have some advertisers that are very TV-driven advertisers that are some of the largest TV advertisers where running in CTV and OTT is a natural extension of what they're doing in TV, and sometimes it's a literal extension of what they're doing in TV to help kind of continue to reach consumers. And a huge portion of what we do today is focused on any and all brands that are trying to drive incremental reach to their linear buys, right? Because we have data on who actually saw the ads on linear television, and therefore we can target the people we know they did not reach. But then there's this kind of growing adoption of brands that are leveraging CTV and OTT as more of a lower funnel strategy. And a lot of those brands either are brands that are in TV but need to kind of push consumers down the funnel, or they're advertisers that haven't been in TV at all. And they're now considering OTT and CTV because traditionally TV doesn't have the ability to kind of truly tie back to real world business metrics like sales lift, foot traffic, or some other high value action. And so CTV OTT represents an opportunity to kind of engage consumers and then be able to follow them all the way through to conversion.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much along the same lines of thinking. Sorry, carry on, April.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Great. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, in terms of the need that it fulfills, I think, April hit it spot on. It reaches a specific audience. I think the other thing to mention would be, the fast are inherently digital in nature, in the sense that, it's happening in a digital environment. Mm-hmm. Primarily on a CTV environment as well. And so what you get here is a combination of being able to reach viewers on the large screen, but also have the ability to layer in some type of data targeting, which is definitely more important when you start to think about addressable and the ability to actually, reach a user or a viewer with a specific message. I think that something interesting to think about how the fast system or fast ecosystem will mature over time. I think the key things that we talk about within OTT, just in general, right, is the idea of frequency capping and ensuring a much better user experience. Obviously, measurement as well. How do you take the traditional linear business of GRPs that are where the majority of money is being spent today. Combine that with, the more impression-based buying that you see within the digital kind of OTT ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a number of measurements, options out there. You've seen, Nielsen bringing out their DAR product for a while. That's definitely taken a lot of adoption with some of the major device manufacturers. I wouldn't say that it's broken through as the key currency, right, in terms of what people are going to be looking to buy at. The idea of outcomes-based buys, right? NBC was a big advocate of that. What are your outcomes, brand? What are you looking to achieve? How do we measure that? That's going to be a really interesting thing to see coming forward. But one just comment, I think, in general around the fasts and the maturity of them. One of the interesting trends that I think we'll start to see over time is, if you look at the fast ecosystem, Zumo, Pluto, Samsung TV Plus, Vizio's Watch Free, there's a lot of sort of similar type of content that you can access across each of those services. And I think as these fast ecosystems start to mature over time, the idea of how can they create from a content perspective something unique with their offering, that they can draw viewers in and sort of entice them towards leveraging their platform will be really interesting. And that sort of is an indication, I think, of where the fast ecosystem is moving towards to become more mature, where the way that they will start to differentiate themselves is through exclusive partnerships with content and the like.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jeff. Actually, we are going down that path ourselves, right? Like we're starting to get into creating our own content channels. Like we have a wildlife channel that's, specific to Samsung TV Plus. And we're identifying kind of, every day we're looking at kind of new opportunities or partnerships that allow us to do just that, specifically to that point, right? There's this fragmentation, but then there's also this duplication of content, especially in the streaming space, because a lot of it isn't original content. And so it's how do you kind of balance that mix so that you have a lot of options for consumers, but also a lot of differentiation. And I think the other piece of that differentiation is also the data that those platforms have on their consumers that help to kind of break through the duplication and the fragmentation and really hone in on, like I want to reach shoppers of mac and cheese. And I need to be able to identify, is that person in a household that's a shopper of mac and cheese? Can I see if they've seen my ad already? And am I in differentiated content? And so I think that is an opportunity, but also a big challenge for a lot of both device players as well as, content providers is how do you effectively kind of combine, achieve sort of the outcomes in both a tangible way, but also an efficient way for a lot of these brands that, have high expectations, but want it to still be super efficient media.
Yeah, you touched on something that was actually part of my next question around which advertisers are leaning in the most to OTT and CTV, and which metrics are they leveraging, and also, is it okay not to be so data heavy? Is it okay not to show conversion and to want to get the right eyeballs? And as long as that audience is big enough, let's actually align instead of having so much data we've gotten so used to having at our fingertips. Sometimes drive up the frequency and make it a less enjoyable experience for the user. I'm sorry, for the consumer. So are there types of categories of business that they're leaning in more?
I would say from my perspective, and obviously I'm a little bit biased because I oversee CPG and retail. So for me, I'll speak from the lens of CPG and retail. So what's really interesting is CPG, although they are the largest spenders in TV and have been that way since the 1950s, they are also some of the most data-driven advertisers. Right? Like TV is a workhorse for them because they have rates grandfathered in from the 1950s. And so it's like pennies on the dollar, and TV will always serve a very important purpose for those brands. but they know that their consumers are shifting. So you'll see that a lot of CTV, or at least, you know, in the minds of retailers or CPG brands that are looking to justify higher costs of premium streaming media, is through sort of a data-driven approach where they are able to validate and quantify what it is that is happening when they're reaching consumers. One, to drive incremental reach to linear, certainly, but two, we're seeing many more CPG brands that are really leaning into OTT to tie it back to real-world business outcomes. But also they're you know, reaching out to us to figure out how we can help them better understand those consumers in a way that they couldn't before. And with that, we're actually seeing a lot of these brands come to the table wanting to partner to build things together that doesn't exist in the industry today. And so what's really interesting is it's not like this standard sort of cyclical ecosystem where we push out media through our content and then advertisers buy that. You're actually seeing it kind of go two ways now, where brands are coming to the table to say, hey, this doesn't exist, and we know it's a possibility. Let's try building it together. And so I think the next, you know, 12 to 18 months will be really telling for the industry, and a lot of development that we're seeing in the marketplace will be driven by not just media publishers and platforms, but also by the actual brands themselves.
Yeah, and tying that into content and what users could bring to the table with content and keeping it authentic, it plays very well into that point. And we've been seeing a lot of success with that across the market, and specifically where I'm at Jukin. Like, we're seeing a lot more folks lean in to things that are not polished. And, you know, Quibi's been a topic of conversation for the last couple panels. I do think that snackable type content, or things that are not made for a full length feature or an episodic full length show, people are used to having things that are real and authentic. And that's what they're leaning into a bit more than things that are polished. And when you do things like that, and those opportunities, you could build these custom programs with advertisers in a more efficient way, and they're more effective because it's hitting a heartstring, or comedy, or drama, or something like that that's real. Jeff, I have a question for you, and I know we have to wrap soon. And if we could get through it, I'll grab one question from the audience. But addressable TV has been a buzzword for some time now. What does that mean to you at SpotX, and how close are we to having fully addressable television?
Sure. I think that by definition, the way that we at SpotX think about addressable TV is the ability to place an individualized, targeted ad to a household or a viewer, right? The idea to present them with an ad that is relevant for them specifically as a household or a viewer. You know, I think in terms of the broader industry, inherently OTT, as we refer to it often, is addressable by nature, because it allows the ability to layer on data. And, you know, that's especially on the programmatic side, we've seen that grow pretty significantly. I think as it relates to addressable TV, I think knowing that OTT is inherently addressable, we tend to refer to that as more of the legacy side of traditional linear. That sort of encompasses making linear, you know, over the air and set-top box inventory more addressable in nature. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of you know, advancements on the technology side that are facilitating that. You obviously, you know, you sort of see this trend of more of those ecosystems opening up. I mean, today SpotX is actually serving addressable ads on some of the major MVPD set-top boxes. And so that ecosystem is moving more and more into an addressable kind of environment. What's really interesting about programmatic, especially the ecosystem that we sit in, is that as the scale of addressable TV increases, inherently you need to have the ability to layer on some type of data targeting to achieve what you're trying to achieve with addressable, and that is serving an individualized ad to each household or viewer. And to be able to do that at scale, you really need to be able to do that within a programmatic environment. And so, that's part of, the recent announcement that we had with our partnership with Project Or is another addressable product that's out there. Same with Nielsen, they have their addressable product. And I think that side of the ecosystem is really interesting, where you're starting to see the programmers themselves are actually now, which has traditionally been an option available to, say, the MVPDs or all the sales houses that leveraging those systems like an Effective or a VIA Media. Now those capabilities are actually going to be available to the programmers themselves to actually kind of step on that linear feed and insert it at the glass level. Obviously, Or is primarily Visio today, but I think it's opening up more and more of that more traditional linear ecosystem to inherently what we see today in OTT, which is the ability to address a specific household or viewer.
Yeah, and I think that consolidation is making this a little bit easier to actually wrangle the proverbial kittens of all the different places that the ads are running, different platforms, be it Samsung, be it Vizio, and hopefully we will work towards having a single metric system the way that we have in linear, and it seems like we are going towards that. I'd like to thank the both of you. We're actually at time. April and Jeff, thank you guys so much for taking the time and for prepping with me yesterday. There you are, April. Congratulations on fighting through technology. Samsung will be proud of you. So thank you both very much. We're going to continue now. We have just one more session left of the day. Shortly, we're going to be welcoming Michelle Beauchamp to the stage. Michelle is the Vice President of Marketing at Vero Water. We're also joined by Christine White, who's the Director of Social and Content Marketing at Ultra Beauty. These sessions will be moderated by Jukin's own Tina Robinson. She's a Director of Brand and Agency Licensing at Jukin Media. So welcome to the stage, Michelle, Christine, and Tina. Are we all here and cameras on? And
hi, John.
Muted? We are. 1, 2, and 3.
Hi there.
Hi. Okay, guys.
Hi,
I'm going to go get a glass of water. Take it away.
Thanks so much, John. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today as we close out an amazing day of conversation around brand storytelling. And thank you, brand innovators, for this opportunity. My name is Tina Robinson. I am the Director of Brand and Agency Licensing at Jukin Media. My role is to partner with and support creative professionals as they tell their brand story through user-generated content. So real people, real experiences, real emotions. Before I forget, I just want to encourage everyone to submit their questions. If we have time, we will get to them at the end. Today, I have the honor and the unique opportunity to speak with 2 women leading their brands in content marketing, brands that I feel are using the power of storytelling to enact change for good. So joining us today, like John said, we have Christine White, the Director of Social and Content Marketing at Ulta Beauty, as well as Michelle Beauchamp, Vice President of Marketing at Vero Water. Welcome, Christine and Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Our topic today is the future of content and storytelling. Before we dig in, I think these days more than ever, people have a desire to know people more intimately, to better understand their experience and how it relates to where they are professionally. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about each of you and your journey to your respective role. Michelle, do you want to kick things off?
Sure. So I've spent most of my career in beverage marketing. My first role right out of undergrad school was an entry-level role with a soft drink company. Combination of being at the right place at the right time, explosive international growth. So really an exciting time to be with a company like that. So worked and traveled all around the world, Asia, Middle East, Latin America, Eastern, Western Europe, launching brands in all those countries. So, that really helped sort of launch my career. Since that time, I also spent a decade with Bacardi in marketing leadership roles for a variety of brands, including Grey Goose and Saint Germain. And most recently, I'm with Vero Water. So we are an eco-friendly alternative to traditional imported bottled water. It's an entrepreneurial company, and we are leader in our space. So it's been an exciting ride. Over the years, I've tried a few different things in between, but I love, beverage brands, and I love that whole experience. So I keep finding myself coming back to it.
Awesome. And Christine, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in beauty. I took a role at Coty Prestige, overseeing global and US communications before social media was a thing, before Facebook even existed. So learned a lot really about the fundamentals of communicating and how to tell stories, and how to engage with media. And then, sort of bopped around a little bit, all within this space of various forms of media, both within social media as well as publishing, and largely on the beauty brand side of things, really just dabbling in all of the facets that really speak to how to tell a story to different audiences. So a really well-rounded perspective, and even had a couple years there where I was a blogger, before influencer was the phrase du jour, and now here I am at Ulta Beauty leading our social and content marketing group.
Awesome. Thank you both. So as we've touched upon in so many of our panels today, 2020 has thrown a wrench in all of our plans. I think Zach said earlier something like, it's the year that no one asked for. Marketing is about, brands telling the consumers a story, and through the events of this year, they've really struggled to figure out, what story to tell, what tone to take, whether or not it even makes sense to spend ad dollars amidst a global health crisis. Christine, can you talk about your approach to brand storytelling prior to 2020, and how have the events of this year affected and changed your content plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the tail end of 2018, we were going under an evolution of our brand at an equity perspective with the tagline, "The possibilities are beautiful." So really this idea that beauty is a superpower, and that it really helps you understand fundamentally how to express yourself in a multitude of ways. So a lot of that work, especially as we think about diversity and inclusion and self-expression and self-acceptance, really allowed us to set ourselves up well, as well as possible during a global pandemic, and then, a pandemic of civil unrest and social justice. So a lot of that, that groundwork in terms of laying down the evolution of our brand really helped set us up to tell the stories authentically, even leading into COVID, and then into the summer as well, in terms of how to show up authentically in terms of consumers and how we connect for the values and missions that we want to continue to uphold. And then just continuing to be really authentic and transparent in our communication and in the stories that we wanted to tell.
Yeah, beauty is a superpower. I love that. When we had our conversation earlier, you talked about all the legwork that Ulta Beauty has done in building a loyal brand community. And the events of this past year have allowed you to engage with the audience in a more effective way through content. And of course, you're not going to be a part of every conversation, but there's certain conversations, to your point, with all the civil unrest that's happened, like Black Lives Matter. And you had said that that was a no-brainer. Can you talk about how Ulta Beauty used content and platforms to show up in an authentic way?
Yeah. So like I said, transparency, inclusivity, diversity is core to our mission and values. So as we moved into that time of civil unrest and social justice, it made a lot of sense to really make sure that that was clear to our guests and to our consumers, and really understanding fundamentally the role our brand had to play in that narrative and the specific position that our consumers expected from us. So a lot of that was represented through the work that we've been doing with our influencer network and the Ulta Beauty Collective, and celebrating our Black creators, uplifting and celebrating the Black brands that we do have, and also acknowledging the work that we have in front of us in terms of where we need to go and how we need to continue those partnerships. So really, for us, it was about, the role that we currently play within the Black community and our BIPOC community, as well as, the journey that we're on. And again, showing up transparently and authentically in the communication about anywhere from, the statistics of diversity within our organization, to the celebration of our Black creators, to even celebrating, moments in time like Juneteenth, and, really making sure that that was conveyed authentically and that people understood, again, the role that we play, because we're not going to play a role in every conversation, but really sticking to the consistent message that we wanted to share.
And in those conversations, did you learn more about the brand community, maybe things that you didn't know before? And is there a strategic plan to leverage that insight?
So we did a lot of social listening and also a lot of asking, right? So asking and taking feedback from guests in social media through our beauty board, which is part of our consumer insights work, as well as going out and asking consumers to make sure that, we're addressing and looking at, all of the opportunity that we have to make sure that we're providing, the guest experience that we know and that we strive for every day. So a lot of it really did come from fundamentally listening and leaning in, making sure that we're hearing our guest, that we understand what it is that they're looking for from our perspective and from us, and making sure that we're able to address those concerns. So a lot of it does, come to life through content and storytelling, right? That's part of it in terms of creating the narrative, but also making to ensure that we can close the loop, not to use marketing speak, but really make sure that that's, evident in our stores where they're shopping with us, or, in the experience that they're having with us from a retail component. So the stories that we told really do need to be told throughout all aspects of our organization. So that was extremely crucial in even how we show up from a content perspective.
Yeah, and when you think about that and like balancing the brand focused social content versus the content focused on a particular product, how do you think about that?
So it's always a balance, right? But really, again, it goes back to the role that we play. So we really think about it as what is the value that we're providing to the consumer. So they definitely come to us to shop, right? We are a retailer first and foremost, but then they also need to know how to use that product. How, what inspires them about that product? What reminds, what are the memories that they have where they were using that product, right? Everybody has a lipstick or a fragrance or something that you make an emotional connection, or it reminds you of a period in time. So really, how can we also think about, again, those possibilities, that idea of beauty as a superpower, and really bringing it back to, yes, the very tactical product, but also the experience. So we really bring it back to value. And sort of that circle that takes.
Yeah. Now, Michelle, being that Vero Water primarily services the hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, spas, all industries hardest hit by the pandemic, can you talk a bit about your approach to content prior to 2020 and, how it's changed and the challenges that you've faced this year?
Of course. So prior to COVID and the pandemic, a lot of our content, or most of our content, was really focused on in-depth, intimate profiles of some of our most influential clients. And these are, 3 Michelin star chefs, James Beard award-winning chefs, some of the most notable sort of restaurateurs in the industry. And, these were very professionally produced pieces where we'd actually go travel to their venue, we'd work with the chefs, they'd cook for us on location, and we do literally spend an entire day with them with Q&A and producing these really beautiful pieces of content. And the way we showed up as a brand is we understand our role as a brand in that story. So we are not the focus of that story. We are just a part of that story. We're a part of the guest experience in those venues. And so that is really how we kind of authentically weave into that story. So we had been producing these beautiful profiles, and they were a little bit more trade focused, but consumers and guests loved them as well, because any foodie is going to love to see, listen to a Michelin star chef and sort of what's behind the scenes, in their specific restaurant, or sort of what's the story of how they got to where they were. So the pandemic hit, hospitality was hit disproportionately harder, I think, than other sectors. Our clients are restaurants, hotels, cruise lines. Many of them were shut down. Many of them are still shut down. So we were very, very mindful in doing a lot of social listening in those first few weeks to really understand what the tone was that we needed to take. And what we started to see was some incredible stories coming out of these clients on how they were completely reimagining what they were doing to address sort of the new challenges of the pandemic. And from that, it emerged that we wanted to start amplifying those stories. So the Michelin star chef that was no longer, the restaurant wasn't open, but they were creating a food program for first responders. You know, the restaurateur that is opening up a pop-up market, or the mixologist that take.
I think we lost.
Pardon me?
Oh, sorry, we lost you for a second, but you're back and we're good.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
You were talking about the restaurants finding new ways to innovate.
Yeah, so you know, everything from pop-up markets to, you know, bottling their cocktails and delivering it to clients, Michelin star chefs who are creating meals for first responders. So we decided to start amplifying and showcasing those stories. We thought that that really was the most important thing to do to really support what they were doing. And from there, we launched a campaign that really focused on asking our community to focus on supporting their local restaurants for home delivery. So we did this very focused digital and social media campaign in major metros. So we really shifted from really doing more polished content, that sort of classic storytelling, to sort of amplifying sort of what was changing and happening in the marketplace.
And did you find that any particular platforms were most successful to that amplification strategy?
I mean, we use them all. I think Instagram is probably the platform that is probably the most prevalent right now that we're using. The Instagram stories, you know, we're able to kind of put things together in a way that provides that content in a very sort of small bite but meaningful way to those consumers.
Yeah. Well, we all know that brands should always be reimagining the customer journey from awareness to transaction to retention. And I think we can all agree, and we've touched upon a little bit, certainly in panels earlier today, that 2020 has kind of accelerated everything. Christine, when we spoke, you talked about Ulta Beauty working to create more of like a holistic guest journey. How do you differentiate yourself from other competitors in the beauty space, which is quite crowded, particularly as it relates to e-commerce? And then how do you use content to drive commerce?
Yeah, so I think one of the distinct advantages we have, especially within beauty, is to look at, you know, the footprint that we have across, you know, anywhere from mass to prestige and everything in between. So really that access to, you know, a multitude of products in one beauty retailer really sets us up well to really think about the differentiation, especially from an overall beauty retail standpoint. And, you know, second to that, obviously being our loyalty program that has, you know, roughly 34 million members. So really just coupling the two to say you can get all that you need with Ulta Beauty fundamentally allows us a lot of storytelling opportunities and really thinking about how to articulate that from a content perspective. So, you know, for us, it really started with the fundamental business differences. And then obviously from a content perspective, you know, how do we continue to reinforce the love and loyalty people have for Ulta Beauty, right? A lot of it does stem from, you know, our rewards program. And it is, you know, the crux of our business, and our guest is at the center of all of that. So really it is a celebration of them. It's a celebration of why, you know, they love to shop with us, and to ensure that we get to celebrate all of the amazing brands that we're able to give people access to. So a lot of it is the combination of those three, coupled with, you know, things that are relevant to our consumers in any moment in time. So you can take, you know, and think about beauty at home and the opportunity and all of the access that they have to our services teams virtually and the products that they can have in the comfort of their home, or to things to learning about textured hair and the products to use, and even education for people that don't have textured hair, and to continue to create that dialogue and that thoughtful conversation, because we really do believe that beauty brings people together. So really that's how we think about, you know, distinction terms of competition, and how content can help elevate that.
And Michelle, same question for you, because water is a very competitive space as well. How do you differentiate Vero Water with all of the other brands in the industry, and how are you using content to drive e-commerce?
So, I think what's unusual about Vero Water, or unique, is that our direct competitors are really competing with us in sort of the food service business. We don't operate like that because we actually enable our clients to ultra purify bottle, fill, chill on site and on demand. We're eco-friendly. They reuse the bottles, they sanitize them. So we are a very green product. But we don't behave and operate like that. So we are relentlessly focused on being a luxury brand. So we consider ourselves, our competitors, as the imported bottled waters. So these are the brands that you'll see typically show up on the red carpet. They have really big sponsorship budgets, but we still consider ourselves in that space, and we live and work and operate and focus on that space. So I'll give you an example. We were the exclusive water at the Vanity Fair Oscar party. So right before the pandemic hit, we went to the red carpet in Hollywood, and we showed up at a series of events, including that one. And there are a lot of brands, established brands out there that are writing sort of these big sponsorship checks. But also they were not sort of operating in an authentic way in those spaces, like photobombing celebrities on the red carpet, just doing things that, the brand should be there to enhance the experience. So we went in there with the story that we had for Vero Water. They were looking for an eco-friendly alternative. They really wanted to get away from single-use plastic. And we showed up with everything from a limited edition bottle for that event. So everything we did was so that our brand would be just a part of that experience, a very authentic part of that experience. And I think that's one of the things that really differentiates us as a challenger brand, is that we show up in that way.
When you talk about the award season of next year is going to look quite different. I'm curious, how are you planning for the next 6 months as we power through holiday and award season? What does that look like at Vero Water?
Well, we're going to continue to support our clients and do what we do. I know award season has been pushed out a few months. I believe it's been pushed out from February to April. So we'll see what that looks like, what the world looks like at that time. I know that a lot of brands have been showing up in a creative way with private events, with virtual events. So we will definitely pivot and shift to address whatever that world looks like, 3 to 6 months from now. But it's something that we look at every single day. It's, you wake up and you say, okay, what's happening? And, how can we address, how can we add value? And that's what we're doing pretty much every day.
And Christine, how do you plan? Holiday season is a huge season for the beauty business, but we don't know if we're spending the holidays with our loved ones or we're going to be in lockdown again. So what does that look like for your team?
Yeah, I think it, to Michelle's point, it's, you wake up and, what's going on and how are you going to show up for your consumer? And so a lot of it is, right, it's planning for what you can and cannot anticipate, and just remaining flexible. So for us, beauty is going to play a part in people's lives, whether we're together or not, right? So I think that's the beauty of the space, the retail space, and really thinking about moments of self-care or moments of glam, and being able to bring people all of that, to be able to flex as needed. So everybody's situation is going to look very different for a lot of reasons this holiday season. So it really is creating that story and creating that content where people can have a personal connection with it because they can understand that that's their situation, but also enjoy from afar things that they may not be involved in this year, and still being able to take away something from that.
Yeah. This year, although it's been, traumatic in so many ways, it's also brought about quite a bit of opportunity. Michelle, can you talk about the opportunity that Vero Water has seen as far as content storytelling? You touched upon helping your restaurants find, ways to innovate as fewer people go out to eat and amplifying the work that they have done. Are there any other opportunities that you've seen?
Well, I mean, in terms of opportunities for us, we've definitely innovated to sort of meet the needs of the pandemic. So we had some innovations in our pipeline that we rapidly accelerated to sort of address the needs of our clients, including sort of touch-free technology and things of that nature. We had always considered ourselves sort of a relationship selling organization in terms of the way we dealt with our hospitality clients, and we shifted that a little bit more to we're actually going with e-commerce for the first time. We've always thought that it was about relationships and sitting down and meeting and talking to our clients, which we still do virtually for the most part now, but we have taken advantage of the opportunity to innovate to sort of meet those needs. In terms of the content and the storytelling, as we said before, every day there's an opportunity for a different story. I mean, I never cease to be surprised or amazed by the ingenuity of people and sort of what they're doing out there. So, I definitely expect to wake up tomorrow and see some amazing content or something that we can sort of build on.
Yeah. Christine, we talked a little bit about conscious beauty, which I'm really excited about. And I wondered if you can share with the audience more about what Ulta Beauty is doing in that space.
Yeah, so Conscious Beauty is a form that the organization just launched that really brings, this idea of choices for yourself and your world, and giving people access to all of the things that matter to them. And that's going to look very different for each individual. So it's really comprised of, 5 core pillars: cruelty-free, vegan, sustainable packaging, positive impact. So really looking at all of the ways in which people want to engage with product, whether that be clean and looking at ingredients and made without, to not being tested on animals, to vegan, and or to how do you even recycle, because beauty is a major player in the conscious movement, and really wanting to look beyond just this idea of clean beauty, but looking into giving people access to choice, giving people access to make decisions for themselves, because what works for one individual doesn't work for another. And that's, I think, really the beauty of conscious beauty, is it meets people where they are in their journey and allows them to have that flexibility in how they want to engage with product in their lifestyle.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, it's so great to talk to brands that are really using the power of storytelling to enact good in this world. And it sounds like being environmentally conscious is something that we can all agree on, and it affects everyone. And seeing your, unique approaches to being part of that change is really awesome. So last week, Brand Innovators celebrated women in marketing, and it's not often that I get to talk to 2 successful women at the same time. So I'd like to use the opportunity to perhaps pave the way for young female marketers who are looking to get leadership positions. So Michelle, I have to ask, do you have any advice for females in the industry?
Well, number one, women should support one another. I found a lot of strength in that. A little piece of advice that I'd like to give is something my father told me a long time, and it's taken me a bit of time to figure it out. He said to me that you need to put yourself in a position to be lucky. And what he meant by that is really be fully engaged, like go out and try new things, meet new people, take those chances, put yourself out there. Because if you don't, you're not even in the consideration set, and surround yourself with people who are going to be supportive and champion one another. I think, as women in the workplace, I remember early on in my career, there was, a little bit of edge, a little bit of competition. And, I've found that we have sort of lifted one another up by being advocates for one another. So I feel really strongly about that.
Yes, awesome. And how about you, Christine?
Yeah, so a while ago in my career, a mentor of mine told me that, when I was considering some changes and maybe potentially leaving beauty altogether, was that not every step in what you're doing needs to be up to build your career, right? So it's this idea of really having a vision for the way you want to affect the world, and that will ultimately lead you to the work that you want to do. So for me, it's really about investing in those experiences that help you to grow and really feed your passion. And ultimately that's going to lead you to, becoming a leader, because it's really fundamentally in what it is that you want to set ahead for yourself.
Yes, definitely. And being open to, and you both touched upon that, is open to the possibility, because you never know where the road will lead you. So thank you both for sharing. And I think we have a few minutes for questions. The first question I have is, when it comes to communicating with your consumers, how do you think about brand purpose, and how does that impact your approach to marketing? Michelle, you want to grab that one first?
Sure. So our brand purpose is doing well by doing good. So our entire purpose is to be that eco-friendly alternative to eliminate all the waste associated with single-use plastic or metals. But the whole idea of doing well and doing good is something that really runs through everything that we do, how we show up and what we say and what we do. So that's really the focus, our brand purpose, and it's how we amplify that message through the various channels. And it's everything from, experience, from things as basic as, how the waste staff even approaches that consumer and what the story is that they tell and how we're a part of that, to the things that we do just to sort of speak directly to them from the brand.
Okay, thank you. And Christine?
Yeah, so like I said when we kicked off, Ulta Beauty has been on this journey from functional to purpose driven. So it's been really enlightening to be able to, really bring our consumers along in that journey, right? And recognizing that it very much is a journey. So it goes back to really living your values, right? And not just telling your values, but really it's that full circle of how do you show up, both physically as well as the words on the page. So for us it's the beautiful advertising that we're putting out there in terms of that expression and what that looks like, but it's also leaning into our communities and making sure that the partnerships that we're creating, the community involvement that we have, and even as we think at the store level across our retail footprint, that we're able to really lean into those communities and make sure that what we're doing and how we're acting is also reflected as well, with the day-to-day interaction that we have with our guests.
Yeah. So the other question is, are there brands out there that you feel are doing a good job in being authentic in their storytelling? Christine, I'll let you grab this one first.
Yeah, so we talk about this a ton, and you can look at it in a lot of different ways. But I think Outdoor Voices, which is a fashion apparel brand, has done a lot in that space in terms of really leaning into their brand identity and who they are, being relevant to their consumer, and really leading with their purpose. I think if you look at there's quite a few big brands out there as you think about social justice, but that really have showed up authentically because it's what they've been doing the entire time. Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's come to mind in terms of just leaning in even more in terms of what they had already been doing and the mission that they had already been sharing. So those are just a couple examples off the top of my head.
And Michelle, do you have any favorites?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with the work that Nike's done around social justice. It's really, I'm incredibly impressed and touched by it. I think it's very authentic, and I think it resonates with a lot of people.
Same. And it's also pretty brave, because once you put yourself out there and your opinion out there, you deal with the consequences. So I agree with you there. One other question. Working from home and distancing have altered consumer media and digital habits in many ways. What are you seeing when it comes to those types of behavioral changes, and how are they adapting? We've touched upon this quite a bit, but maybe Michelle, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I mean, for us, with everyone working from home, there's definitely been a bit of a shift to sort of home delivery of things and bottles and plastic. So what we're sort of predicting is, as things eventually get back to normal, the whole idea of being sort of environmentally conscious is going to be back in the forefront of consumers' minds again, and we're going to be ready for that. So I think there's been sort of a temporary shift with sort of everyone at home. They're doing everything at home. They're consuming content at home. They're doing their meetings from home, and they're getting everything delivered at home. And so for us as an eco-friendly company, we sort of watched that shift, but we're fully prepared for sort of when everyone kind of wakes up and looks around and says, wow, we've had a lot of stuff delivered at home. It's created a lot of waste. Let's start looking at our eco-friendly and environmentally conscious brands.
Yeah. And Christine, you actually had brick and mortar stores, so your plan has shifted drastically. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. So obviously, beauty is a very tactile experience. So even though our stores are open, our testers continue to be unavailable to the population. So we really need to bring that experience virtually to them. So tools like Glam Lab in our app allow people to try on the product, whether they're at home or in the store, so that they can make decisions on purchase wherever they might be. Things like our one-to-one beauty advisor. So again, a lot of our services are not able to be offered at this time. So being able to have access to someone in your home one-on-one to go through, whether it's your skin, your hair, makeup, and having access to an individual that can help you with that. And then from a content perspective, obviously we've seen a huge surge in live content. And so thinking about things like bringing masterclasses online and being able to give people the content again, through their phone or on their laptop, via our site or our social channels. And then also thinking about video, right? So obviously a huge surge in video activity. So being able to roll out longer form episodic video series, on focuses like skin or hair are some of the things that we're also sort of pivoting to that we may not have done, if COVID had not happened, but really seeing this need and desire for even longer form content and not even as snackable as sort of what we were seeing prior to the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I've appreciated the Halloween makeup tutorials every day. I think we have time for one last question. Reaching Gen Z isn't about having a solid TikTok strategy. What other types of new media and what content should brands be leveraging to reach a younger audience? Michelle.
For us, it's showing up at the places where they want to be. So we've always focused on, what is the sort of the up and coming sort of venue, restaurant, chef. So we follow that very closely to see what that group of consumers are following, and that's where we want to position our brand. So in order to even be part of their conversation, we have to sort of get the brand into that account and then sort of be part of that experience. So that's where we focus, sort of to begin that conversation.
Yeah. And Christine?
Yeah, I think for us, we've had quite some success with Gen Z from a retail footprint perspective. But, for us, really, it is fundamentally understanding how they engage with our brand first. We understand that they want to support brands with purpose and that brands that stand for something. So really looking at ourselves first and making sure we can show up authentically there for them. Obviously, with beauty, right, it's really having access and accessibility to a large footprint of product available to them, as well as then the education of how to use it. Yes, TikTok is important, but I think even more so than TikTok, right, is really understanding fundamentally, what they are going through at any period of time and really showing up with the content that speaks to them. So whether it's TikTok or another platform, certainly, really it is leaning into and understanding the culture that they're living in right now and what they're responding to.
Yeah. I see John, so I think that is our cue to wrap. But I just want to thank you both for your time today and your insight. And I'm really excited to see what both of your brands do over the course of the next year. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, John.
Hi. Thank you all so much, Michelle, Christine, Tina. It's a fantastic session.
Thank you.
Michelle, I think that you really summed it up the best and really summed up the day, is that every day there is a new story. And we can't wake up to see what's going to happen tomorrow at least and see how we could be part of each other's lives. Because it is a more intimate setting. We do want authenticity that does have to come through the messaging of our advertisers and our clients and the content that we're viewing, and everything is tying together more now than it ever has. So thank you very much. It was a great session and a great day. I just also want to thank all of our other speakers for joining today. I personally took a lot from each one of the sessions, between the right moments of self-care versus glam. What Christine said, going back throughout the day, that there's no safe bet when it comes to testing, and there's no safe bet when it comes to aligning with certain content from Ari. When we were listening to he and Val talk on the Fireside Chat around the state of entertainment marketing. And then the way that the world of sports is changing and how content is driving that and how it's shaping that. And again, telling a new story every day. So it's an exciting time to be in. It's scary, but we're all coming together. And that's, I think, the most important part. Brand Innovators, I'm doing a plug for you. We'd hope that you all join Brand Innovators tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a webinar and livecast for digital marketing innovation. We'll be joined by senior marketing leaders from StubHub, Avocados from Mexico, and Johnson & Johnson, as well as Procter & Gamble and more. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you all for joining. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Have a great day.